The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It is Wednesday, February 13th. It is 7 p.m. and we're at the Shepherd Hill Library in Dudley. We'll all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, yeah, I'll do that. I'll just, okay. All right. I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of Wednesday, January 23rd.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Discussion?
I have one on page 8G. Under the graduation date. It says May 31st, 2010. I think we want 2020.
I think so.
Back to the future.
Back to the future, right.
That's just a typo.
Okay.
2020.
That's worth.
It's on G, the middle of the page.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
January
Page
23rd.
8.
On page 23rd. It's just a typo. It says graduation date change.
Anything
It
else?
says May 31st, 2010. It should be 2020. 8, you see a G, consideration to amend? You see it?
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a typo. It should
Anyone
be
else?
good. Okay.
On page 2, in the last paragraph, on the third sentence, it should be February 27th, not February 28th. And then on page 3, fourth paragraph from the bottom, third sentence from the bottom, the fear is that if the committee interviews them, does not invite them to site visits, we are indicating that we are eliminating them. And Mrs. Rabbit said she would like to leave the pool intact throughout the process.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our executive session on Wednesday, January 23rd.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Approve the minutes of our budget meeting on Wednesday, February 6th.
So moved.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion on that?
I
Kathy?
have a couple on page 2, the second paragraph. Page 2, second paragraph, Dr. Nash said the committee, on the second line, it says the desire to add 10 new positions instead of all. You see where I am, Dr.
Yes.
Nash? And then I think the figure should not be 12,000 for adding 10 positions. That figure must be wrong.
Right,
What would it be?
right.
400,000?
Oh, gosh,
Like
no,
450.
I think it was.
Just
the
say the
total
necessary
included,
funds?
right.
Would you just put funds and leave out the number? Or do you want to put the number?
The 12,000 was the differential that you were over at this point. Remember, it was 11,000 and some change that you were actually over without putting any new positions in.
So what should we
So-
put there?
At this point in time, the budget reflects that we are over by approximately $12,000 at this point.
But the sentence says about we desire 10 new positions. We don't have the necessary.
I just say,
fund.
period.
That's done. Period. Okay, and cross out the rest with the
Right.
12,000, the rest of that sentence.
Right.
Okay. Okay, then I have another one on page 4. Under Laurie Pacheco's presentation. There was no significant change with 141 students. That's just one grade, isn't that kindergarten? It sounds like the whole school,
Yeah.
141.
Yeah.
What should we say? Is that kindergarten, 141?
I
Should
don't
you-
know, I'd have to pull it and look to
Look
see.
up that book. I think it- Because there is a significant change, isn't it, for kindergarten, that's why they want another person.
She's focused on kindergarten because the numbers are typically very volatile.
But this says there's no significant change, it sounds like she doesn't need that other section.
She's projecting 141 for kindergarten, that is kindergarten.
Is that a change? 'Cause it says
No, it was
significant-
142, I think, this year.
Okay. So, okay, you just put it for kindergarten.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mrs.
Elaine?
On page 3, on the first paragraph, on the second statement, concerned about the equity in the sub-separate program, as there is only a program at Mason Road School, and Dudley students from Dudley Elementary and Dudley Middle School are transported to Charlton. Can we specify? And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, all in favor? Motion carries. It's unanimous.
No, I wasn't here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wasn't
One
present.
abstention. So Mary abstained, okay, Sandy? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session on Wednesday, February 6th. So do I have a motion for that? Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Did you get a copy of it?
No, because I
I
told
can't find
Sandy
mine.
at the beginning, no one got copies of that.
Put in the separate executive session.
Yeah. Because you did get the 23rd online, but the
Yeah, I
6th
didn't see
wasn't
that.
online. And I told Sandy, but I think she's got it. You don't have them either.
And I don't have my
Well, it's not on the
I made a
iPad,
motion to
so
accept, but we haven't read it
she
yet.
only
Right,
gave the
you want to put it
23rd.
on for the next agenda?
Yeah, or we should withdraw those, if we haven't seen them yet.
Okay.
So we'll do it for next.
Well, all right, so she withdrew, and we'll do that for next time. Okay? And approval of the warrants. This evening, we do have warrants that will make its way around the table. And next is student representative report. Kaylee? Hi, Kaylee.
Hi, how are you? All right, so for Shepherd Hill, athletics is just wrapping up their winter season, and throughout the basketball season, varsity girls basketball player Molly Springer, she scored her 1,000th point January 29th versus Algonquin. It was a home game. On February 22nd, Shepherd Hill Cheerleading will host their Winter Invitational. It's the largest cheer tournament in Massachusetts. And swimmer Natalie Beklowski, she's a senior here at Shepherd Hill. She's going to be heading to Florida in March to compete in the United States Junior Nationals swimming. She's actually a member of Team USA. And then in the arts here up at Shepherd Hill, over 10 students were selected to have their artwork displayed at the State Transportation Building in Boston for the statewide Youth Art Month. And there were 5 student recipients for the Massachusetts Art Education Association Awards. And then in the community on February 26th, there will be at Dudley Middle School a Holocaust survivor story from 6 to 7 p.m. And Joyce Davis, she will be telling the story of her mother and aunt in their Holocaust rescue. And then throughout the district, we've been introduced to this program called PBL. It's called Project-Based Learning. And it's district-wide. It's been incorporated into all of the classrooms here throughout all of the science, math departments, history departments, and English. It's student-centered and it integrates knowledge with practice. It includes active exploration into real-world problems, and it develops teamwork and communication skills because students are often broken up into groups to design and solve problems, and they're asked questions to solve them, and they have to figure out their own questions to ask. So that's been really successful, at least through Shepherd Hill. I've seen the new PBL system we have here. So that's all I have for today. I'm sorry I was out last week. I was sick. Any questions? No? All right.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to Citizens Forum this evening. Do we have anyone that would like to come forward to speak with us? Okay. Communications, Dr. Nash?
Actually, my communications are also part of my special topics report this evening, so if I could combine those. In your packet this evening, you have a retirement letter, and if the committee would allow, I would like to read that retirement letter into the record. This letter is from Michelle Billis, who many of you know as a custodian at Dudley Elementary School. I had an opportunity to meet with Michelle as she was really retiring. So she writes this letter that says as follows: "It greatly saddens me to send you this letter of resignation effective immediately. I am no longer able to work as a custodian at Dudley Elementary School. For the past 11 months, I have been doing everything possible to return to this job, and that I have enjoyed for so many years. However, at my recent visit with my physician, she made me realize that I would no longer be able to perform the work required to do the tasks that I have involved to the level and the pride that I have shown on a daily basis. Therefore, I must submit this resignation effective immediately." You will find the doctor's note dated January 17th. "My years at Dudley Elementary have given me the opportunity to interact with a wonderful staff and faculty as well as the children. It has always given me pride to know that my custodial duties have helped provide a great learning environment for everyone. I appreciate the support that I've received from Mrs. Sebold, Mr. Tower, and the administrative offices during my very difficult health issues. I was always hopeful to return to the job that I so enjoyed. My thanks are extended to you and your warm concern, as well as everyone who has been supportive in my school and my district. Sincerely, Michelle Billis." So we have written and accepted her retirement with, obviously, regret.
Oh, good, so you did send her a letter.
Yes, we did.
And I think we should accept her resignation.
Retirement.
Retirement. Oh, I thought you said resignation.
It is her retirement.
Okay, her retirement. So I'll entertain a motion to accept Michelle Billis's retirement.
So moved.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Also, I'm pleased to acknowledge some other communications that we have received in your packet from the Office of the Governor, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This letter was sent to our STEAM Director, Karen Aris. Congratulations. We are pleased to notify you that the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District has been awarded an FY19 Innovation Pathway Planning Grant of $10,000. We want to thank you for your commitment to developing an innovation pathway program at your institution to strengthen career education for high school students. Through this funding and your continued support, we hope to expand access to great educational opportunities in the Commonwealth. You will be receiving further instructions from the Executive Office of Education on next steps, and please contact Bob LePage, Assistant Secretary, if you have any questions. Sincerely, Governor Charles D. Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karen E. Polito. So we are pleased to accept that, and certainly I'm very pleased to report that we were one of, I believe, 58 schools across the state to receive this funding. It's obviously supported by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as well as a few other foundations. You've heard about this. All of this Project Lead the Way connects to what our student rep talked about, and that's project-based learning that the entire school district has been involved in. We will continue with this, particularly in focusing on some of our new programs that we have introduced, the biomedical and some of the others that we'll be introducing next year and as years follows. Taking the lead on this is obviously our STEAM director, but also our high school principal, Bill Chaplin. So I congratulate them because I know there's a lot of work and effort that has gone into this. So thank you. Secondly, I have a few students that I'd like to recognize, although they're not here today. All of this is connected. You have some information in your packet, and I'm going to apologize in advance if I mispronounce their names. I've been practicing, but I don't guarantee you I'll get them right. Talking about some of the innovation that we've been focusing in on K-12 with respect to project-based learning, what we're recognizing this evening are 3 students that really were recognized for innovative approaches to science and technology. The first student that you have received an article about is Jacob Hawaza. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Someone's nodding out in the audience. So. I will summarize a little bit about Jacob. He is a student at Dudley Elementary School. He was selected as the Innovative Student of the Month after being nominated by Mrs. Billis. As the handout in your packet indicates, he was instrumental in training students in PBL class design. So again, we talk about the need to ensure that we approach things in a district-wide manner, and I think the focus on PBL this year, and particularly as we move on to next year, you'll see, is on the forefront. So I congratulate him. Your picture, I know, is in black and white, and certainly not as, doesn't show as well as the color. Our second student is Barry Hansen. He's an 8th grader at Charlton Middle School. He was nominated by Ms. Markley. He is being recognized for his, again, successful approaches to problem solving, hands-on authentic learning where we engage students in really becoming the problem solvers instead of us providing them with the answers. His inquisitive and innovative approach to finding solutions to problems have really made him a peer leader. Students tend to approach him now when they have questions, which is a nice segue, particularly for a teacher who is trying to work with a number of learners. And they seek him out for his assistance, so we congratulate him also for this recognition. Our third student,
Vikram Jha.
thank you, Vikram Jha. He's a 4th grade student at Heritage School. He has a passion for shipbuilding, and his interest in shipbuilding has taken him to lead a group of students in the study of the Titanic. He also is extremely interested in working with the science behind the motion of why propellers move the way they move. He has an inquisitive scientific mind, and certainly, based on the article I read, and what I do know about him, I am sure that you will see him somewhere in engineering and/or research as an innovator. So I congratulate them. I think it segues perfectly to what Kaylee has talked about today and this evening, the focus that we have on really building students' ability to engage and to be problem solvers, to look at taking us to higher order thinking skills, again, across the district. So I congratulate all of them and thank the individuals who have provided me with this information. So that, one other thing that I'd like to again follow up on, you did not have this in your packet, but let me see if I can find it very quickly in my packet. Oh, boy. I am going to try to say this from memory, because somewhere in my packet is this information, but I wanted to follow up again on the presentation that's going to happen on the Holocaust, and the daughter of one of the 50 young individuals who many years ago were rescued, if you will, and saved. And she will be presenting to us on February, Barbara, 26th
to the community and 27th
here at Shepherd Hill.
2 students.
Right. So we welcome that. We also have, Barbara really was the individual who is responsible for really putting this in motion. She contacted us, and Barbara took the lead on this, and seeing how this would fit in with some of the, obviously, the studies in history, but also just in diversity, and what students and what faculty should know and care to know about what has happened and to us and as human beings. And one of the things that I think is interesting also is there is a book club, a group that have come together, a group of our educators who've come together to read the text that was written, and we'll share and we'll work through that to receive some PDPs as a result of that. So I think it will be an interesting program that will be happening. We'll also be talking to you at the next meeting about screen ages, which we have scheduled, again, through Barbara taking the lead on this at a later date for community. So we'll mention that at the next meeting.
I just want to acknowledge Merrimack College.
Yes. Oh, yes.
They have
Right.
loaned us their traveling Holocaust display for free. For
Yes.
both the public event and for the PD workshop we're doing with teachers and for the students. And that's a series of panels developed through the Simon Wiesenthal Center. So I just wanted to publicly thank them because that was above and beyond.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary.
Right. So
Thank
that
you.
is
That
it.
concludes.
That does. Special
How about
topics.
our members? Do we have any communication here?
Just as a follow-up, and I know Dr. Nash sent out an email regarding the Mars information.
Yes.
I sent out a second email today that was a follow-up that was, it's MASS, the Mass Association of School Superintendents, executive summary of their finance priorities, and I thought it would be a good document for all of us to print out and look over. I think it'll be valuable for us when we're having our conversation with the towns on the 20th, because it's the direction where MASS and is focusing their legislative action on educational funding.
Any other members with communications? And I do not have any this evening. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Nash? That's it? That
That's it.
concluded? You
Oh,
combined it?
communications, that's right.
Okay. And I will take one of the items out of order, and that's that's E, District Reorganization Study, Mars update. And Dr. Stephen Hemman, and I should be able to pronounce his last name because I'm Italian.
Catalucci.
Catalucci.
Close? Are we close?
Are we
You're close.
close? How do you pronounce it?
Well, if you're Italian, it would be Gagliarducci.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's what I thought.
If you're American, it's Gagliardi.
Okay.
Okay.
I've known him for 8 years, and I still have a problem.
Okay.
We provided you with a status report, and I don't know if there's any particular questions, but then we can make some comments on it. I would say we've been down here 4 times, visiting not only with staff, but with the superintendent, and reviewing job descriptions and what people do. And I want to say that we said one of the early observations that very willing and positive about the region, and excited about the future. They've been very quite understanding what we were doing. We had to explain what we're doing first, and then we worked with them. And job description, we asked them, here's the job description we had on file. Is this what you do? In a number of cases, there's been changes. So we're going to be working on through the job descriptions and having a set procedure, set order of things, which will come to you. And our recommendation would be that you should approve them, because I don't think you have them from the superintendent and all the other central office positions. One of the other things that we point out in many cases, if someone is absent, there's not cross-training, and in some cases there needs to be cross-training for that. We have talked earlier about some positions and looking to maybe recommend some changes to you. One of the things that at least Paul can comment too, is that when different things came up that had to be done, it always seemed to be who had the time to do this and that, as opposed to who should be and where should it be put, and who should be doing that. Also looking very carefully at how many people report directly to the superintendent, and using your mid-level staff, your directors, and the principals, and how that should develop. And we'll look at we'll provide you with a recommended organizational chart. You can't have 14 people coming in every time there's something to happen, that the superintendent's got to handle it. It really needs to start at a certain level that you would need to, like with the director of finance, your SPED director. We're not doing SPED director, your superintendent is. But also you're dealing with your computers, your technology, et cetera, recommendation who they should see for when they're having a problem. And then, you really need to have your superintendent, he or she works for you, and you got to concentrate working with any for the school committee, working with the community, and then working with people. Also, staffing, the fact is that once the principals or people directors decide who they want to hire, in that process, we can make some recommendations on how when the hiring and then people come up and they have to be and filling out the appropriate paperwork, how does that work? You have a benefits coordinator, but we think maybe it might be needing to be more than just a benefits coordinator in HR, dealing with HR issues that you need to do. So we see some there. I'll say we see people are very dedicated, very caring about you. You've got 3,800 some kids, 700 employees, about right?
A little less than that.
Less, 600? You got a lot of responsibility, so you need to be organized so that you can effectively take care of both the students, the teachers, your citizens, parents, and so forth. So we're going to make some recommendations on that. Paul, I don't know if you want to comment?
We wanted just to give you a brief outline and see if you had any questions. I also would just want to publicly thank the superintendent's administrative assistant, executive secretary. She's been great. We've given her a ton of stuff to do, and she's been very accommodating, very, very, very helpful to us. Just to back up what Steve said, I think one of the things that we noticed right off that needs to be discussed at some length is the whole notion of there are a number of key positions that if that person leaves for an illness, there's not a backup. And I do think that that's an issue that needs to be addressed regardless of whatever direction the board takes. But we're here just to see if you have any questions, give you an update. We're hoping to give you a couple of organizational charts, depending upon which direction you wish to go, depending upon budget. And one that may be more immediate in terms of the new superintendent coming in, and maybe one that you might want to consider in the future if it has budget implications. But we hope to give you our best look at the district, and certainly are willing to answer any questions if you have any this evening.
I provided with you 2 pieces of documents. I went and looked at where could you compare to some districts and provided that to you, looking at primarily at the size. And we found Acton Boxborough with 5,400 and down to North Middle 31, and you're right in the middle at 3,765. Those are right off of the DEU website. And then how much cost per pupil are you spending on administration? And you happen to be low at the bottom on that one, how much you spend per pupil for that. So you're not overly administratively. I'll also be providing you, I got 4 districts that we're getting information from compared to Hamden, Wilbraham, Dennis, Shamrock, and Whitman, Hanson around your size, and give you some information on what they have, what their central office looks like, and the staffing levels that they have, as well as how much they're spending to do that. We are very acutely aware of having superintendents on your, and I've been a business manager, on your budget and what's happening there, so we're very acutely aware that what you need to watch, we're doing that, but we also need to be upfront with you and say, these are some of the things you really need to think about. You're not getting your money's worth out of us, I mean, and to give that to you. And we're outside people coming in and looking at it, and years of experience. I've been in education now 45, 48 years of doing this, and as a teacher and a superintendent, and that, and Paul's been, I don't know how many years, Paul. I'm older, so, with that. But again, we're trying to give you what we see, and then answer questions, and then you have to take it from there what you want to do. And we understand there are constraints, so there's no question.
Your timeline for presenting the final report, the plan was to do it the first meeting in March, I believe, the 13th of March.
No,
No.
it was the second.
The second meeting, the 27th.
Fingers crossed.
That's right, the 27th, excuse me, I
Right.
remember.
Backup would be
Okay.
the first meeting in April.
Right.
But we're going to try to shoot for the.
So the final
second.
report with the recommendations for any organizational changes or models that you would be recommending would come at that
I
meeting.
think one of the things to recommend is the, say, positions that, you know, maybe look at, and then some changes within what you have, and reorganizing who does what. Some things we're surprised that certain people are doing things where I think it should be in another location, so we'll give recommendations on that, and then look at a chart and try to make it reasonably how many people report directly to the superintendent. We noticed on a number of job descriptions, it said to this department and the superintendent. Well, that's kind of, you know, reporting to 2 people is difficult. Obviously, you would say certain people report, say, to, like the accounts payable and payroll report to the business administrator, who reports to the superintendent. So the superintendent's involved in that process, but if there's a payroll problem or accounts payable problem, they don't go run the superintendent, they go run into the business manager. I'm trying to set that. Then at that point, then the business manager makes a decision, depending on what it is, when to see the superintendent. And we're talking at least probably 4 people directly from central office plus the 7 principals. But one of the things on the principals looking at is dealing with personnel issues and any incidents and things that happen that need to do, as well as the superintendent would be evaluating the principals. Believe me, the evaluations, if you do it correctly, 7 principals, and you're gonna have at least 4 people, so you're talking about 11, and it's very extensive. I think you've seen that, but that's a lot. Superintendent's gotta stay with it and do that. But also recommending that if, say something comes up and it's transportation, or it's a budget issue, money issue, they would go see the business manager. If it's a special education issue, they would see the special ed director first. These are the first levels. So again, if they had technology problems, go see the technology director. So trying to say where they should go so people know. And the other thing, when you hire people, we got some comments when somebody gets hired and they come up and fill the paperwork, who do they see? You're not going around. It's got to be one person. That's why we're talking about HR, benefits person starts there, and then they take care of what they need. They should be able to take care of everything they need to, and then appropriate passing of that. And also how you handle Corey and the fingerprinting, which is highly confidential, how that would be handled. So again, some recommendations there.
Any questions?
I have a question. Right now, you're going to be working on the job descriptions for what is currently happening. So then when you move forward and work on the actual recommendation for possible restructure, would those job descriptions necessarily fit into that restructure?
Well, one of the things, the first thing we did, we were given job description, we asked. And when we met with the people, we said, here's your job description, does that meet? And in a number of cases said, well, not totally. And so what we're trying to correct in what you have, what they're doing now, doing that. Then like Paul and I haven't talked extensively, but yet feeling is then we'd say, okay, here's what we think you should reorganize. And if you did, this is what the job description would look like for that person.
I see.
You have a lot of people who support each other and people who have taken on responsibilities when maybe it didn't fit their job description, so you do have a number of people like that. You have a couple positions that the job itself is not necessarily related to what the job title says. I don't want to give too much information, but so if we make a recommendation, we would say to you, for example, this job right now probably should be done by a person and a half. Right now, it's only been done by 1. And that's because the second half of that person's, or the partial part of that person's job is not related to the main function of what that person does. And so there needs to be more effective in what her main responsibility is. It would behoove the committee to consider how to take part of that job away from her. But there's a few jobs, only a few like that, and if we make a recommendation to upgrade a position, we would certainly give you the current job description and then the new job description.
But I don't think, at least I understand, I don't know if you've ever seen job descriptions for your central office. And in fact, I asked for the job description of the superintendent. The only thing I was getting was postings and stuff, so we've gone through and taken what you've done for postings and put it in a job description format. And a part of that is putting in there who will the superintendent evaluate. And that was the other thing we found, is sometimes people said they had not necessarily been evaluated on a regular basis, so we're going to be very clear. This position is to evaluate these people, so it's very clear what they're supposed to do. Something they have, but some inconsistencies.
Any other questions? No? So
Thank you.
We'll be
Thank you.
looking forward.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you for
putting
taking
us
us early.
out. We get to go home.
Yes, that's
We
why I
both have
put you first.
about an hour and 15-minute drive. And Sturbridge, right in Route 20, it's a water main break, and the traffic is backed up going west from the center of Sturbridge and the Dunkin' Donuts, almost to the Mass Pike.
So that's,
Huh?
It's not better yet.
No?
I'm glad I'm not going there.
So I'm lucky I was going the other way, so I think I am taking the Mass Pike home, so.
Good
Thank you.
evening.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Director of Finance and Operations report. Rich?
Thank you very much. A couple of items for the committee this evening. First, Dudley Middle School has received 2 donations. The first, a donation of $200 from the Dudley Women's Club to be used for the Be Better Club. The second, a donation of $100 from the Hickey family to be used to reduce food service deficits. I recommend approval of both of these donations.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the donations.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, seeing none. All in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. The FY18 audit has been completed. Copies of the documents are actually at the district office. We knew that the February schedule was going to be crazy. In the past, we've brought the auditors in February. But knowing that these meetings were going to be booked with budget and, oh yeah, that superintendent selection thing, we figured one of the March meetings would be best. So I don't know if the committee has a preference for either meeting. When I checked with Mr. Sullivan as of last Friday, he was available for either or. The big question for the committee is, do you wish to start early with the audit presentation? And if so, what time?
We've done that before. 6:30, I think we started.
Yeah, I think a half hour it provides enough
Right.
time for Q&A.
Right, so 6:30, everybody good with that?
Which one?
On
first
which-
and
13th or the 27th?
Yeah.
They're coming the
Either one.
27th, so we better do the
Well,
13th.
13th will be good. Yeah.
You want to plan for the 13th? Okay, I'll
March 13th.
I'll try to confirm that he's still available for
Yeah.
the 13th, and if not, we'll go to the 27th.
We'll
But
have to
we'll
do
start
the
at 6:30 on
27th.
that, whichever day that is.
Okay.
Thank you. Excess and deficiency was certified by the DOR. As expected, it was certified at $1.4 million, and these funds may be used to support the FY20 budget process as we move forward. The Charlton Water Loop for Heritage and Charlton Middle Schools. I'm going to blame computer error, but it's possible that it was user error. There was supposed to be a little chart under here detailing what's happening this summer. So I'll send that out to the committee. But in essence, the project is a go. I know it's been talked about for a very long time in Charlton. So a lot of the infrastructure work will be done in this summer. And next summer, when the overlook is turned on, the entire loop will get turned on. And final paving will be done in the summer of 2020. So as I said, I'll get out that information to the committee. My apologies that it wasn't included here. The next thing here is the joint purchase group for health insurance. The committee is aware that we've been in discussions with our current health insurance broker about trying to form a joint purchase group in the area. We've had success in getting down to a participation agreement that the towns of Douglas, Millbury, Webster, and ourselves as a regional school district are in reasonable agreement with at this point in time. The monthly rates as presented to the group do represent an opportunity for financial savings to the district. We did receive the additional documentation we were supposed to receive this week, so this timeline below is a go. As soon as we get back from the February break, and I believe the meeting is actually scheduled for the 27th, we'll have an IAC meeting to review the documents and to review the presentations to staff. For the next week, we'll have presentations for staff after school. 2 will be held in Dudley, 2 in Charlton, 1 at the secondary level, 1 at the elementary level, to provide an opportunity for as many people as who want to attend. On March 13th, I'd like to bring the joint purchase group in to give you guys a presentation of the joint purchase group and go over some of the details and see if the committee has any questions. Between the March 13th and 27th meeting, the IAC would get together to provide feedback that they've received from the staff and vote their viewpoint, and then I would ask for a vote by the school committee at the March 27th meeting.
I have a question. Is the only thing that's changing is the premiums, or is the program changing? What exactly does this involve?
Well, basically, right now, we're self-insured as our own little group.
Right.
What this would do is a couple of things. We would remain self-insured, But it wouldn't be just us alone, it would be us with these 3 other communities. And there would be literally a new public entity created by these 4 entities as equal members to basically procure and provide health insurance and other insurance benefits.
So could the insurance carriers change? I mean,
Yes.
it could, so it may not have the same program. I mean, the same
The
carrier.
plan design is the one
Same.
thing that that I have been adamant about for Dudley-Charlton. Knowing the pretty big changes that we've gone through the last couple of years here, I knew that our employees, our communities probably were not ready for drastic plan design changes. So I said, we have to duplicate our current plan design, and they've been able to do that.
But the carrier might be
The
different.
carrier may be different, right? The card that you carry may not say carrier X on it, it may say carrier Y.
Okay.
But that will be the only
But it'll
difference.
be the same
Plan.
insurance, basically.
It'll be the same plan design, same,
And will the rates-
limits, same
And the rates
co-pays.
will be lower?
That's what it looks like
So
right now,
that's why we
yes.
would save money, because that's 75%.
Exactly. We would save money as well as the employees.
Okay.
It's better to have a bigger group when you have a
Right.
trust fund.
There's a lot of.
When you're
adva-
self-insured for the trust fund.
Yeah, there's a lot of advantages to it. The administrative cost on a per-employee basis goes down. And one of the big things is the stop-loss insurance.
Right.
That's something that costs us alone
Right.
$400,000 to $500,000 a year, a pretty big chunk of
What's our
change.
stop loss now?
We have it set at $100,000.
Okay, and that will remain the same with the group, or is it going to be?
That's subject to how it's designed, how it's bid out, but the intention would be there. But again, we're not on the hook for it specifically.
Right.
It's the group that's on the hook
Right.
for it. So it'll be a group decision about where those numbers are.
And the stop loss is like if a member spends more than $100,000, then the stop loss kicks in.
Catastrophic.
It's reinsurance.
It's reinsurance. So good.
So if that timeline works for the committee, I will invite them to the meeting on the 13th, and we'll go from there.
Good. Sounds good.
All right. And you did have some budget documents that were attached to this. They have been updated. You received a new set on Monday, and you received a new set tonight, and I know that we'll be talking about the
talking about
FY20 budget as a separate agenda item in a few minutes.
And Rich,
That's all I have for this evening.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
all right. Budget and Finance Subcommittee report, Elaine?
We met on Monday morning, February 11th. Our topics were the district capital planning. As a follow-up to the committee's interest in a long-range capital planning study for the district, Mr. Matthew has arranged for 2 companies to make presentations on February 20th. Dr. Nash, Mr. Matthew, and members of the Budget and Finance Committee will be in attendance. The FY20 budget, we continued conversation about the budget presentations that were made last week in relation to revenue, funding of positions that have been proposed, and assessments to towns as the draft budget currently identifies. We discussed Frontline, which is formerly ESOP, as a substitute management system. This was previously researched during the last school year, but was shelved due to other priorities. The cost of utilizing this online management system would not only provide a more competitive edge for obtaining substitutes. Most of the districts that surround us use this. It's an online system where a ping goes out to substitutes that have been approved, that there's an opening. It can be uploaded by the teacher as soon as they realize they're going to be out, so it puts us in a more competitive position for filling our openings. And we'll bring further information to you forward as we continue to explore that. We discussed the use of E-rate funding reimbursements and how that is allowing us to move towards completion of the wiring projects in our buildings. Reimbursements that will be received may be able to help fund the source, be the funding source for our capital plan study. And school choice, we began the conversation to look at the historical data surrounding the district's participation in school choice, and we will continue this topic on our February 25th meeting. That's it.
Thank you, Elaine. Any questions for Elaine? Thank you. Next item, FY20 budget discussion. Dr. Nash?
You are purpose for this evening is for us to continue the discussions following the budget presentations by the principals and directors last week. And you have in your packet an updated memo that was prepared by the Director of Finance and Operations and along with my input. And I'd like to walk you through it before we get into discussions regarding either the new positions and/or any discussion around the organization, the reorganization of some positions. Again, I point out to you that we are still in early stages of our budget development, that there are still many unknowns that will begin to unfold as we move through this process and wind down. We mentioned those in the memo that I included in your budget books. I would remind you that, again, this is stage one of the process. And as part of the development of the budget, we have had to make some assumptions that we pointed out to you, again, in the memo that you received. So I'm going to walk you through what, at this point in time, are the knowns. First of all, we had conversations at the last meeting when we spoke with you and the principals and directors presented to you some need for a lot of new personnel. But in particular, we pointed out that the district is out of compliance with respect to the need to bring in another ELL teacher so that we meet the minimum requirement number of minutes. We also talked to you about the required additional new 2.0 SPED assistants, instructional assistants, to be split among our elementary schools. And also, we heard you very loudly at the last meeting, or clearly, with some clarity, I would say, that your concerns, as we, as the administrative team, expressed concerns about a number of positions, but in particular about the need to add another nurse at Shepherd Hill. So I want to point out to you, as we talk about this, that you are well aware of the costs. We have presented those to you. That you'll see on the next page that we have a mechanism for which we can potentially fund those, should the committee desire to do that. So if you would turn for a minute to the second page and look at the last two bullets. We talked to you about the fact that circuit breaker, that one of our budget assumptions for circuit breaker for FY20 would be that we would commit what we believe to be around $800,000. We anticipate that we'll get a little bit more than $800,000 of circuit breaker to balance our FY20 budget. Currently, we have approximately $600,000 in circuit breaker this year, which we would be rolling over for the potential contingency that you certainly would need or potentially could need for next year, because you've committed all of the circuit breaker monies to balance your FY20 budget. We could cover the two instructional assistant positions, both of those are SPED positions, out of circuit breaker. Doing this would, at this point in time, bring that account from $600,000 to approximately $548,000. That would be monies, remember, that we would roll over for next year. They would constitute the contingency. My caution is that we still have between now and the end of the school year to go through. So certainly any changes or fluctuations in that would impact this. But the funding for those two positions could certainly be taken out of that, and we feel comfortable based on that. We also have done with Mrs. Allen taking the lead, I think, a pretty thorough job of looking at the special ed department budget, in particular our staffing, to ensure that what we know at this time, at this point in time in February, we've accounted for. Again, I would note that things change, but we've done a very good job of saying, here's what we know, here's what we anticipate. She's had numerous conversations with the principals, looking at students who might, at this point, be potentially in need of some services, and to factor those in to the degree that we would think that we could and should do that. So I think saying that, I feel comfortable that we should be fine moving forward next year with, even $500,000 as a contingency.
Can I ask you a question before you move on?
Sure.
Go ahead.
These two IA positions are not likely to disappear in the following year. Is that correct?
I would say they're young students because, as you remember, we identified they're at the elementary schools, and they're not, they're split. I think it's a 0.6, 0.4, and I forget what the other one is. So my answer would be no. We would see these as a need to continue probably.
Right. And if I understand this circuit breaker money, the rollover, this is money that once it's rolled over is no longer going to be available unless we have rollover money from the FY20 budget that would roll back over. Is that correct?
We have anticipated using all of FY20 circuit breaker to balance the FY20 budget.
Right, so we
So
don't
we're
anticipate-
rolling over this, and we can roll it over for a year.
Yep.
Right.
So I guess my question becomes, we only have a solution for 1 year
For,
for these two IA positions that we assume
those would
we
have
will
to be
need in the
part of your
future.
budget, although you could, that, not knowing what FY21 circuit breaker would be, you know, you would be using monies to offset, you know, your sped budget, if you will, through circuit breaker
I
also.
just wanted to understand
Yeah,
that
right.
we're going down a certain path, that's all.
Your path has been determined, not unusual, to use circuit breaker to offset special education charges. The two areas where you have real concern and should continue to have concern is the fact that you are balancing your budget primarily on excess and deficiency, E&D, to the tune of $1.2 million every year that you have to move forward, and school choice to the tune of about $900,000. So combined, you have a reliance that you must have that money available in order to balance your budget. Any fluctuation in school choice means that we have to either go back in and look to where we're going to either eliminate positions, make some reductions. But your reliance is on those two areas to balance your budget, and has been for a number of years. I would say maybe not as much of a heavy reliance on school choice in the earlier years, but as I understand it, in the last few years, it has increased. Right.
I understand, thank you.
I have a question, follow up on that. Because with the new plan that Mrs. Allen presented, some instructional assistants are having to lose their job. Are they, some of those, could they fill this position? Are they different type of categories?
I believe they certainly could
They're
fill those
qualified, whatever the
positions. Yes.
qualifications are there, so they could take those.
There is no distinction between the different categories of special ed instructional assistants that we may have for a substantially separate program, or a general sped instructional assistant, or a one-on-one or two-on-one. Certainly, having said that, many of them have additional training, particularly with one-on-ones and two-on-ones, and substantially separate programs. They certainly could have training, but yes, any of these people could fill that.
Okay, thanks.
So let me take you back then. So we also mentioned, the other two positions that we had talked about, the ELL position, which really is a compliance position, as I've indicated to you, and your concerns and our concerns as an administrative team for the nurse at the high school, based on a number of factors that you certainly heard presented by the high school principal. We would recommend at this point that the funding for that come out of E&D. Our current FY19 E&D is $1.4 million. We had planned to use about $1 million moving forward. Again, you heard me say that we moved that money forward to balance your next year's budget. That would leave us with about $400,000. So if you make the choice to fund almost $100,000 for those positions, then you would have about $300,000 at the end of this year in E&D. So that would be our recommendation at this point. Let me just add that I did have some more conversations with the high school principal, and we talked in depth about where internally he might be able to make some personnel adjustments. The more we had those conversations, the clearer it became to us that this was not, at this point in time, it was not going to be something that we wanted to bring forward to you, thus the recommendation for taking it out of E&D.
Kathy?
Now, the ELL is already in the budget because of a resignation of someone, correct? Is that still true? At our budget meeting, you said the ELL would be funded by a position that a person had resigned. Is that still what you're doing here? Did you tell us that
Not with
Monday?
this one. I think you're talking about the,
I thought that was mentioned at the budget meeting.
I think you're talking about the PT.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
the
think it
PT.
was
Yeah.
ELL.
If
So
that,
that-
wa-
Okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
so it says it's counting in the budget, so that doesn't mean it's coming from the 97? It's already there?
Yes,
somewhere.
it would
That's
be
what I'm
coming
saying.
out of the E&D.
So where's the
Right.
97, what is that paying for? Because the sped are also taking out circuit breakers, so you were putting in 97 for the nurse? With-
The
with
total.
benefits?
You want to explain that?
Yeah, if I may. The way that I looked at this is, last year, we obviously received the override from the two towns. In looking at the number, when we talk about the fact that the assessment to the two towns will increase by $149,380, that's with all of these positions in the budget, in the general fund budget, as is. The two recommendations so that includes the ELL position, that includes all of the reorganization, that includes the two sped aides, and that includes the high school nurse position. That is what accounts for the $149,000 overage from last year, or helps to account for that. The way that we would cover that, if we were at the last minute, at right before town meeting, with a desire to have no increase in assessment to the two towns, the total assessment to the two towns, this would be our plan. We're not suggesting that we vote on this plan tonight, but that's where we ultimately could end up.
So in other words, 97 plus the 52 from the circuit breaker gives about 147.
Exactly.
So the ELL teacher is already in there?
It's within the budget, yes.
Okay, because see, my confusion was you had the 97, but you said the 52 was coming from someplace else, so I thought that was, 97 was just for the nurse.
No,
No, okay,
no.
I didn't understand those figures, all right, thanks.
That would be a couple of nurses.
I thought that was kind of high. They would like
Which you would
that.
probably gladly take. Two more
I'm sure they
nurses.
would.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
I just have a question, and forgive me, have we budgeted for any roof repairs?
That, if I may, that really is a capital item. We have ongoing small patches here and there, of course, within the budget, just as we do, any given year. But major roof repairs, no, are not included in the operating budget at this time.
Okay, and what does our capital account look like?
Do you want to speak to the capital account?
Well, I think we're still putting together the capital plan in terms of what we're going to go forward and request from the two communities and how exactly we're going to do that.
Okay, so if something fails on one of the roofs-
Catastrophic?
Yes.
You
Does
would-
that take out of E&D?
No, you would
No.
probably not have the funds to take it out of E&D, given the fact that at any point in time, or at the end of this school year, you would have approximately 300,000, should you
Right.
approve what we would recommend. You would have to go back to the towns. Yeah. If you had a catastrophic event that caused you to have to borrow or need whatever the amount was, and you did not have that in your budget. What we have in the budget really is to do stopgap repairs, small repairs. The purpose of meeting with DRA and Studio J, those representatives, is, remember, for us to come back, potentially to develop a master plan that would then be brought forward to the towns in the future for a long-range, plan for cost for doing all of the major repairs or whatever.
You would
they-
have to get a debt
Right,
exclusion.
yes. In all likelihood, you would move forward with a multi-year debt exclusion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Continuing on, so, question on, those were the three positions. So just so that we're clear, as you know, we prioritize positions for you in section 3, I believe, in your book, and we'll come back and revisit those certainly if you like, but just to be clear, these are the only positions at this point in time that we have the ability to fund, given where we are. Again, there are still unknowns, so I just want to point that out. Moving forward, I wanted to also point out, under the reorganization, that you are funding, if the reorganization plan moves forward, you are going to be able to fund some additional new positions. You heard us talk about the ability to move the cafeteria monitors' salaries into the food service budget, and then to cover the library, the 2.0, instructional aides that we are recommending you approve for our elementary libraries would then move into the general budget. So we feel comfortable doing that, and you know, those are new positions, putting back positions. Those are also positions where we could, for those individuals that may lose positions, we could also, you know, have, there's another 2 positions potentially that individuals already within our district may be able to move into. Also, with the restructure of the proposed restructure of the SPED team chairs, that savings, again, anticipating some things about that those, that savings would allow us to fund 3 positions, potentially. One is the special education teacher at Shepherd Hill. One is the job coach, the instructional aide at Shepherd Hill, and the other is the additional cost for hiring a BCBA, which was offset by the contractual services cost of $18,000, so that's a really $38,000 cost on that position, given the fact that we wouldn't need the contractual services right now for the BCBA. So point in that is that the savings of approximately $125,000 would also get 3 new positions. Now, should that not happen, we would have to look, for example, you know, we're basing it on what we currently know about people in the positions, what we estimate those salary range would be for those new positions, and certainly if someone currently in the position moves into a SPED position, teacher's position, then that savings is different, and we would have to look to take that differential out of circuit breaker, you know, the $500,000 in circuit breaker that you would have. So again, you know, we're anticipating. Nothing is like everything else. This is a moving target for a lot of the budget at this point in time. Our revenues, we indicated to you, I think in our memo, that we are able to offset this year moving into, as we started to plan our FY20 budget, we had not a great influx of new revenues. So again, I want to point these out to you. I know you can read, but it's important to note that our biggest pool of money is the fact that we rely on, at the close of every year, we must have at least $1 million, if not more, to roll over out of E&D. Because when you look at that and you see the numbers and you see the fact that we're looking at approximately at this point $75,000 that we're going to get an additional Chapter 70 funding. We've got an additional $38,000 in regional transportation. We're able to take about $110,000 out of the transportation revolving. When you add that up, that's not going to get you very far. So what we rely on is E&D. So when we add the $1.6 million in E&D, that brings you up to the number that we had talked about earlier, about $1.222 million in, quote, new money that we roll forward for next year. Given that, we still are, if you look at assessments and you skip to paragraph 2, I think you can certainly, when you read paragraph 1, that becomes, you know, pretty clear as to the assessments to the town, which is not based on our budget, but based basically on the state formula. But if you look at paragraph 2, given where we are right now, we would be projecting that the total assessment to both the towns would increase by $150,000. Now, if the committee chooses to take a different approach based on discussions with the town last year, based on the override, that's where we would kick in and recommend to you the 2 bullets below that say we would move to take and use this money. The conversations that you had at the table last year as to whether or not you would go back to the town or live within your means, I was not privy to. So we wanted to present to you that, given where we are right now, we would have to go back to the towns and say, we would need a little bit more. We know that we may have heard what you said, but we would need around $150,000, and that would be divvied up between the 2 towns in accordance with their assessments. Or the committee could certainly say, this is not what we want to do at this point in time, and therefore our recommendation under the 2 bullets would be that we could look at that, and here's the funding mechanism that we could use. And again, that's your decision, whether or not you're comfortable with going back to either community to say, we're going to need additional money next year. So,
Well, first of all, I don't think we should ask for any more. That's what the override was for, and I think it would be unfair to ask either town, even though Dudley was going down, I don't think it would be fair to ask either town for more than what was budgeted last year. I have another question, just so I'm clear. The 149 that we're over is made up by those 2 figures down below.
Yeah,
So it's a wash.
the initial memo had Dudley decreasing.
Right, now
This
it's-
memo should say Dudley increasing by the 18,000.
Oh, okay.
That makes the math work.
Yeah.
right, yeah.
I know it doesn't, that's why I pointed out.
Doesn't matter, I still don't think we should do either one, but, so, if this 149 is taken care of by these 2 figures down below, did you put those jobs in this budget that we got tonight then?
Yes,
Okay.
the budget
So you already
includes
put-
all of the positions that we've talked about on the first page.
Okay, but were they in the budget last week?
All
Last time,
but the
but the-
last one, the school
The
nurse.
school nurse was
Okay.
not, because it wasn't until the presentation, so the others were, because
Okay.
those were compliance.
Right.
So the ELL teacher and your 2.0 were basically compliance. We had to put them in. We had
Right,
no
okay,
choice.
so-
The nurse wasn't, but because
Okay.
we heard the conversation that people had, we wanted to look at a way to do that. But I also wanted to point out that obviously this is where it puts us, and not being here last year and being part of the override and the discussions, we wanted to get a sense of what your comfort level was with having, going forward with anything more than living within your means, if you will.
Well, that's my opinion, that you've already put the 149 out of E&D, so you have kind of taken out the higher assessment.
That's not reflected in the revenue
No,
pages
but
or
in
in the
this sheet of
assessment
paper.
pages, but in this memo it is,
Right.
So you
yes.
just rewrite that and put in the
Exactly.
figures. That would be my recommendation.
Now, Rich,
Yes.
on the draft for the Charlton and Dudley assessments, right? So I'm looking at the 2018, 2019 assessment, say for Charlton. So your proposed is the second column where it says 2019 to 2020. So that's under $319,217.
That's the net assessment, and you can see the rather dramatic decrease in capital assessment. That's because the debt for the 2 middle schools is going to be off the books in FY '20, so that's what accounts for that.
Okay.
When we're talking about assessments, we generally talk about operating assessments, which is the minimum local
Right.
contribution, additional contribution,
Okay,
and
so
transportation.
that's why it's,
It looks right.
it
Exactly.
looks low. I mean, it looks like it's a high amount that.
Yeah, if you just look at those
Right.
numbers, oh, wow, that you got a great
Wow.
decrease, everybody
Right.
celebrate, happy.
Yeah.
But that's not money that is available to either of the towns.
Okay,
Chair, can I ask a question?
go ahead.
I know that I wasn't at the table to make the decisions about the override and such, but is this something that typically you'd go back, Dr. Nash, to the communities and have a casual conversation about funding that may be necessary in order to make our budget whole or work? And I don't think 150,000 means it would be assessed directly to the taxpayer. I think that the town has some ability, if I understand the budgeting process, and I think I know it from the town better than the school at this point, that they could try to find ways to absorb that. Am I accurate in
You
that statement?
certainly can. I'm really looking for direction. I was not involved here this last year. I don't know what commitments were made, what was said. So I would take my lead really from those of you who were there and, what your feelings were about what was spoken and sometimes the unspoken, if you will, what was implied. The cautionary tale is that this override will only get you through this current year we're in and next year. And so you are going to have some serious discussions for the FY '21 budget. So the balancing act is sometimes, do we want to have an initial discussion at this point in time for this amount of money? Or do we want to put this on the table, figure out a way, which we've proposed to you that we could potentially do this, and wait? We also, remember in the back, along with that, is going to be the potential for a capital So you're going to be looking at the fact that both towns are going to, somewhere down the road, you're going to have those conversations. So timing is always everything in life to some degree, so this may not be the time, but again, I would, not being present in those conversations, not knowing really the tenor of the towns that well with respect to where they are financially, we will have that opportunity in our March 20th meeting with them to have some discussions and see whether or not, it makes sense. And remember, again, while that, you need to vote on a number, February 27th, there can be some changes that happen either on town floor or whatever, with mutual agreement, if you will. So, does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So what I want,
Just to add, and I know that we've talked about this, I think Superintendent Desto in his presentations was very clear that the override was a 2-year solution. The one thing we can't control is what the state sets for minimum local contribution. That is outside our realm of being able to do anything. The state says what the state says. That money has to come forth. I think our responsibility is to present a budget that has needs in it. At this point in time, I don't think that we have addressed anything that isn't a necessity. And where we're looking to do trades, it's for the better use of fiscal resources that we have. We're trying to utilize the money that we have wisely. We're still early in the budget process. Things can develop and change, so I think we have to take the information in and have discussions with our town. I remember quite clearly the conversation that this is a temporary solution. So the override with anything was to allow us to remain whole without having to do drastic cuts and provide us an opportunity, and that's why the approach was to use that $1 million to do the networking projects so that we could at least get in line with where we needed to be for technology compliance with the state. So it wasn't designed to have huge gains, it was designed to keep us afloat. So it's concerning all the way around with where we are, and it would be difficult to promise anyone that it isn't going to cost more to do what it is that we do. Our responsibility is to be fiscally responsible with the money that we have, so. That's where we were with those conversations.
I believe it was termed an override of survival.
Exactly. I know it was a very clear message that our superintendent gave.
Okay.
so,
Anything else?
yes, looking at, if you have your budget books with you, and you were to open to section 3, one of the questions that I would ask, again, knowing that at this point in time, at this juncture in time, we really are only looking at the first 3 positions on the first page, the ones we just mentioned. My question to you would be, is there anything else as you look through the rest of those that you would either have questions about where we rank them? And do you see them in the ranking that we do? Because I think, again, we have some unknowns, and those unknowns maybe not come clear until close to the end of the school year. And it would be, I think, behoove those who are here to be able to move forward on some of these positions, knowing that the school committee was in approval of the priority order in which we've presented them. So that's the first question I would ask. One of the other points that we've had some discussion about is the position that we ranked number 9 out of the 10 that we were ranking, and that's the athletic director position. I've had some continuing conversations with Mr. Chaplin about this position. We indicated to you that this position that we were looking for was a 1.0 full-time equivalent athletic director. We gave you a sample. We told you a little bit about it. It would be a position that would require an administrative licensure. It would be a position that I would have discussion with, if you will, with the union. We've given you comparable data for why. One of the things that we presented to you was that there were some budget offsets, and one of the members asked the question whether or not this position could be almost totally funded if the current .6, the person who is in the position now, Mr. Burke, is a .4 AD, .6 health teacher. And if we were to be able to take the health component, the .6, and move that in and into our regular programming, and someone else pick those up, what impact would that have? What would it look like? And we would be able to almost fund this entire position. So Mr. Chaplin can speak a little bit to that, if you'd like to hear about how that might work and what the impact might be. We've had some discussions as late as this afternoon on that, so would you like to come up? And I bring this up because this is a position that carries with it, I think, some opportunity. One, it is a position, when you look at the current person who's in this position, there are probably 30 or 40 days in the year when his job as an AD takes him out of the classroom. It's just the responsibility of, him being really wearing two hats. Also, in districts that are comparable to us, these positions as administrative positions carry with them some responsibilities and oversight of staff. So it provides another, at a high school our size, with the activity and the amount of students, it gives us the presence of potentially another administrator in the building. So I'll turn it over to you to talk about the impact, really, if we were to eliminate the .6, how would that impact the delivery of services for
Right now,
health.
we have, right now, his responsibility is he teaches 6 sections of health. 3 in the first semester, 3 in the second semester, because it's a half-year course. We also have another teacher who teaches 2 sections of health, 1 each semester, as well as some family and consumer foods and wellness course. We could shuffle that around a little bit and make it even, so we would go from 6 sections of health to 4 sections of health. And we could adjust it to see what health is not a requirement right now. It hasn't been since I've been here. There are certain populations in the building that don't take health, that just can't get it in, a band member or a show choir member or someone doubling up in other areas. So I feel like we can still make that work and have that offering within the building with the reduction in order to fund the AD position without any new money.
My question is, and I don't know if the certification, but if the person who has this now is not certified, he goes back into the classroom, are we going to have to hire an outside person and someone's going to lose a job? You know what I'm saying?
I'm talking positions, I'm not talking people. So
But
the person I would hire would need an administrator's license with some experience, the ripple effects, there could be some bumping of such with health teachers and so forth. I don't know the exact nature of that would be.
But definitely, if there's no one in the building who's certified for that.
It would only be if you happen to have had a retirement in that certification area, coincidentally, at the time you're doing that, then you're not going to bump someone. If you don't, you're exactly right. There would be based on, that individual certification, based on the years of experience, they have a right to a job over someone who is non-PTS or at least senior. So yes, the answer would be yes, there would be a potential ripple effect of that. Yep.
And that would cause unemployment, besides the fact that someone's losing a job.
Could, it has the potential, right, if someone is not able to find employment elsewhere, yes. Yep.
That's my concern.
Yep.
I don't know certification, who is in the building, I don't know if people are certified for this or not, but it could lead to someone losing a job. And we're
Yes.
already doing that in the special ed aid, so that's a lot of people that are losing their jobs with this reorganization, which bothers me. Even if it's educationally sound, I think we also have people that are involved that are losing jobs.
Well, we wanted to present it.
I know.
Because I think it's, it's an option.
May I ask a question? Part of one of the concerns that Ms. Perry brought up was that the elimination of some of the ability for kids to have health curriculum. are you able to put some of the health curriculum within, like, spatter it into your
We wouldn't be
phys
losing
ed
health.
classes?
When I just explained the sections, we would still be running 4 sections of health in the building, even with the elimination of that. We would just reshuffle it around. So we're
I
not
thought you run
eliminating,
6 sessions now.
we run 8
sections.
sessions now,
Okay.
Three each semester.
between a .6 and a .2.
So health is currently a semester elective. So students elected, it's not a requirement for graduation, unlike PE, which is a requirement for graduation. So it would just be that there'd be fewer, opportunities for students to take health. Yeah. Because you'd have 4 sections as opposed to what you have now. Currently, you have you don't have a 1.0 teacher, you actually have a .8. The 2 sections being taught by the family consumer science and the .6 being taught by this individual.
Can I piggyback on that question, if you don't mind? Will you look to increase the number of students that can be in one of those health semesters?
Yeah, I mean, right now, they probably have, from the class size I gave you, it's usually 23, 24 kids in there, generally a 10th grader, generally. So we could increase that. We could always go to 28, in
And
there.
still maintain the same level of
Sure.
knowledge and learning?
Yeah, again, right now, where we started was, the way it's designed right now, I'm paying about $4,000 in sub-coverage because the AD is the health teacher, and they're already missing time right now. That's one of the flaws of the design right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Good, thank you.
Are there questions about any of the priorities, or are you comfortable?
Now, the bottom line for our aides that will be out of jobs, is it 10.4? Do we know what the bottom line is?
I think.
Is that what it
That's
is,
what I was
Miranda?
And then we currently have potential of 4 new positions, because we have the 2 library assistant positions and the 2 new ones, and then I have 2 resignations.
So that could come out
That
of
it's
like the
going to-
10.4.
Right. What I'm saying is that 10.4 has the potential of decreasing,
Okay.
obviously.
And we talked about some of your aides currently are certified in special
We do
ed as
have
well.
some who are certified, whether or not, they wish to apply for the position as a, right. So that number is, gets impacted, obviously.
In that same vein, don't we need that kindergarten instructional assistant if we add that section?
You would need to look at that, yes. Mhm.
And that's pretty definite that we will need that section, would you say?
Well, I think this is still a number that we're not, the question I still have is whether or not Mason Road could potentially, is going to need that. As time goes on, we're going to look at numbers and see. And so I think it's too early, but yes, we would need to, unless the committee chose not to do that, and you would need to fill that aide position.
I think that's, I would add that to the list of critical myself.
Yeah. Well, the only reason it's not there is
Right.
because the uncertainty
Right,
about whether or
exactly.
not Mason Road can actually, go through with that transfer. It may not be, they may not be able to do that, if they can't, as numbers change between now and the end of the school year.
The position of athletic director, are you moving that into the area where it's a cost neutral?
I did not, because at the time when we were having our discussions in the budget, we did not, get into, Mr. Chamberlain, sorry, that's my police officer in Rochester. Mr. He was on the school committee with me. Mr. Chaplin and I had really not gotten into that level of discussion. And then the more we had discussions as time went on, and I understood really, the need for this, and started to look at the comparable data that he's put together with districts our size that that all of them have athletic directors who are full-time, given the fact that their role is also as an administrator, we decided, we had a conversation, and I said, are we able to, can we? Let's go back, revisit it. What's the impact, is health a requirement, first of all? How many sections do we currently run? What would it look like, if we took that .6 away? And so we decided that we wanted to present it to you this evening. So that, the answer is, we did not at that point, when we discussed this and put this together, we weren't really in that depth of discussion.
So, just through the chair, a comment. All of the positions that were presented, I think, were very well validated by our principals as to the reason why we needed them. There isn't anything here that we couldn't use, but we're trying to balance that with our budget, and we don't want to do assessments to the town, so we can't have everything. So we need to, you know, we need to look at how we present things, and I'm comfortable with the ones that were presented as compliance issues that we have to address. And I understand the rationale for an athletic director, if it's being presented to us as a cost-neutral position, so that we can add that without adding any impact on the budget. All of these other things are very important, and my understanding with how this was presented to us was we were going to look at them in an order of need, so that if through the budget process and the funding process over the course of the next 3-4 months, when we get to a final state budget and we know what our numbers are, or something ends up costing us less than we anticipated and money is available, we could then respond to saying, this is what we've identified as our next area. So is that what we're looking to do right now, is to
Yes, I
now
would-
take this and determine that we're in agreement with the way they were originally ranked?
Right. It would be, I'd be looking for the committee to either say that, you know, these are priorities, they're for us. You agree with the way we have ranked them. And should monies, obviously, we're not going to take action, but we would be ready to post these in anticipation that you know, if monies are available between now and the end of the year, some of the unknowns become positive unknowns for us, positive knowns, I should say, then we would move forward based on the fact that you are in agreement with these positions and the way we've ranked them.
I just have a question about the salary for the athletic director. I just want to make sure that we're in alignment. Like we have new salaries for our special ed administrators that are only at 87, and then we're starting the athletic director at 92. So
Full year position, and the difference between they and the others is that these
They're
would not
not.
be full year.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I have a question on the instructional assistant for the library addition. We made a really tough decision a couple of years ago to eliminate librarians at various schools, and it was a really, really difficult decision for everybody. But it needed to be made for budgeting purposes. And now we're looking at actually making an inequitable adjustment and adding $26,000 to the budget by adding a library instructional assistant back in, where there would be a certified library media teacher at DMS full-time, and then this instructional assistant at CMS.
The two that we're referring to coming out of the revolving are the 2.0 that would be shared at the elementary levels. The proposal that you're referring to, and I know that you weren't here at the budget proposals, were made by Mr. Packard, and to look at the inequity in the sense that they have right now, because they have one person split between two buildings. Not necessarily the inequity in one is a certified library media specialist and the other would not be. But the ones that we were talking about earlier this evening, coming out of the CAF revolving, would be the 2.0 that we would recommend that we put back in at our elementary schools to be split between the 4 schools.
Mr. Then, Josh, if you want me to, my comment on that last week, whether it wasn't fair that I suggested that they split the media, the certified one would spend half the time in one town, and the aide would be in the other one, and they'd flip-flop. And I mentioned that to the the principals, and just for discussion, because I said it didn't, on paper, it didn't look fair. Now, whether those instruction systems might be just as good as a certified librarian.
I think the
But
major,
at
right.
present, this librarian is split, right now.
Right. I think the
Dudley
premise, if I could speak, but they certainly can't speak for themselves, the premise behind it was to really, first and foremost, to try to have someone there 5 days a week in both buildings. And then the next step would be really, what would that really look like? And so we're looking at trying to make it as cost-effective. We easily could have said another $56,000 position for a library media specialist. So I think, looking at it, Mr. Packard said, well, if we could have maybe a library assistant, could very well be someone who has a 4-year degree. Unfortunately, we're not going to pay them that for the 4-year degree, but we certainly could revisit that and say, is there another way to make it even more equitable along the lines that Mrs. Caballa had talked about? And that would be a discussion that the two principals would want to have, you know. Because there is, obviously a major difference between someone who can deliver direct instruction, classroom instruction, and someone who, is not certified to really do that. So, but it wasn't, the 2.0, Mr. Natasi, was about the elementary ones that we were
Okay.
talking about, taking out of the revolving cafeteria.
There are two sets of library assistants, two are for the elementary, and the other one is for the
And the
middle
other-
school, basically.
We had volunteers before for the elementary
We still
that were
do.
working.
We still do.
We have for 2 years.
Right,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, we don't have consistency, and at that age, and at that level, we really want to open up, the libraries at the elementary school on an ongoing basis, not relying on, the good work of volunteers, particularly at that age level. So that was the intent. And when we started to have a deeper discussion, and Mr. Matthew said, and I were talking about how do we fund that, and we said, well, let's try to be a little bit creative. So I think this was the most creative way of doing that, using and moving those salaries for the lunch monitors into cafeteria revolving. We're healthy enough to do that. Again, down the road, that could change, but we're healthy enough to do that. And the immediacy that we get is that we get people into those libraries at the elementary level, which I think is critical, really.
But this particular
This
position.
is
that I'm-
not, this is a
the se-
separate.
This is separate?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes,
so my
right.
question would be, how much direct instruction happens at the middle school level in the library?
Currently, I'd ask both principals or to talk about that, whether the individual currently in there delivers direct instruction or not, is the question.
Currently at Charlton Middle School, our librarian teaches one exploratory class in a 2-day cycle out of a 6-day cycle, so on days 1 and 2. We share that one individual person for 3 days out of the 6-day rotation. So we schedule her for one grouping of exploratories at this point in time. So, and she can do anything she wants with that from a library specialist side of things, or she can do something with makerspace, or she can do something with whatever she feels comfortable. So it's not a direct curriculum piece under the exploratory model, the current exploratory model.
And that's the same model at Dudley Middle School. It's, as I referenced last week, we have those gaps in the schedule with our kind of inequitable unified arts model. And we utilize the library media specialist to fill some of those gaps. Some of the courses are, like Mr. Packard explained, extension activities, fun, engaging activities with makerspaces, maybe doing some units, teaching the kids chess, working on some different math applications, or some reading instruction. But for the most part, it is directly tied to our schedule, but it's additional above and beyond, not direct content.
And it's also important to note that if we go through the reorganizational aspect of what I presented, we will not have 18 sections of exploratory next year. So therefore, our librarian wouldn't be used for the direct instruction through the exploratory model. We could use her in other ways, working with classroom teachers, things of that nature, but we could train somebody to do that just as efficiently as having somebody in there who's a regular library specialist.
And conversely, on the Dudley side, if the position of that phys ed and health, which hasn't been discussed tonight, and I understand why, because there are a lot of other key priorities for the district, if we can't get to a more equitable schedule, 5, 6, and 7, 8 in our unified arts rotation, having that library media specialist available every day allows us to fill more of those gaps in the schedule. So our team teachers, our direct content teachers, teach fewer of those exploratories, and/or potentially I could have a health class not taught by a content teacher, taught by someone else, if I can fill the exploratories. Which is really why that model of having the librarian full-time on one side of the district was a scheduling fix for us.
It also presents, as everybody pointed out, the parity issue. If your staff member is library media specialist is used to deliver content, i.e., direct instruction, oftentimes they they deliver technology in some buildings. They do integration of technology, working with classroom teachers on projects. Currently, we're not really utilizing that skill set that way, in that capacity. The exploratory, it really isn't the same as a content level class. So you still have the issue of inequity, even when you bring on someone who isn't a certified library media specialist. Bear in mind that middle schools don't need certified librarians, the old word, library media specialists. You do at a high school level, but you don't need them at other schools. Part of the reason that schools have them is because they deliver direct content to students. They're part of the rotation of unified arts or specialists to deliver content, so therefore you need the person who's certified. We've got a lot of scheduling issues that have happened over the years by eliminating positions that present the challenges for them, and i.e., that's why you kind of get the inequity to some degree, to a great degree. So.
And the library's a learning hub, so
Yeah, right.
we have multiple classes in there, we have our ACES instructor in there, so we have a lot of bodies in there at this point in time. So they could all work together. Anyway, we do have to do this.
Before they walk away, if you don't mind, I know that you were all in a meeting together to rank these together with the other administrators. What put the library assistant, library instructional assistant ahead of the guidance counselor at Shepherd Hill, if you don't mind?
Can I start and then you can take it from there?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we're looking at having a home for somebody, because at the end of the day, when somebody comes in for 3 days and then picks up and leaves, there's a void to fill. We're lucky in our library that we do have our ACES instructor in there servicing kids as well. But for the librarian herself, it's very difficult to come in and all of a sudden set things up, and then you're gone for 3 days, and you're really not reachable by the staff. I mean, they're going, all their efforts are going back to the other building, to the other side of the district. So, home, consistency, protecting the resources that we have already there, continued relationships with our staff, and bringing the staff down to be able to utilize the computer aspects of what we have to offer right now. All those things are vitally important. And after those 3 days are up, we don't have that person in there. We rely on whomever. It could be myself, it could be the assistant principal, it could be somebody backfilling to make that work and to make everything stay consistent and status quo for days 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, and my piece directly for the support of that position, over, for example, the PE and health position that I'm looking for, it does relate to the reality of understanding the big picture. Everything that Mr. Packard stated, I am 100% agreement with. I would also add to that just the management and operations of the library, maintaining the equipment, monitoring the usage. When a mouse disappears or gets unplugged, we do have middle school kids.
Key switch.
Being able to identify the issue and being able to put in a support ticket quickly so we can get the issue addressed, so we have adequate technology up and running continuously. It's just very difficult to maintain an instructional hub with part-time coverage, consistent coverage.
To answer your question too in a larger scope, one of the things that I gave the EAC at our meeting was a listing of what I call essential questions. And so as we started to look at all of these positions, we looked at thinking in terms of what might have been, what was the impact on students? What particular position may have had a greater impact on more students? What might have been part of a strategic plan, i.e. your foreign language teachers? What raised the bar for students by adding it, foreign language at the middle school? What might have had a program impact between and among schools? Adding instructional assistants in that. What was really about equity? So there were a series of, and one really wasn't more important, but there was a series of essential questions that I asked them to think about. They didn't go through the list, but I gave them to them as we start talking about this. Think about these questions as we process and rank them. So that's what we did.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Safety, security, those were essential. There were a bunch of questions. They went on and on.
Yeah, I knew that you were in a room together,
Right.
kind of
Yep.
talking it all
Yep.
through.
Yep.
It's just hard to tell on paper,
Right.
so
Sure.
it's easier to ask the
Yeah.
question.
Yep.
Anyway.
I'm going to follow up with what your explanation was on this, because in looking at this and reprioritizing it, the strategic plan is very important. But my question would be, is parity a higher priority at this point in time than the foreign language teachers. If we're looking to rank this, does parity with the use of the library and filling holes, should we be filling our holes before we're adding a new service to it? So I guess that's my question, because you've given explanations on both the library and the PE piece, which becomes more of a parity of how do I handle the current scheduling needs that I have versus now trying to add something that we don't have. Do we address the deficiency before we look at adding something new? They're all important. I guess it's just the position of the library instructional assistant and the health teacher is, less of a dollar value than adding foreign language. And if we're looking to prioritize, do we go there first? We may never get to $112,000 available to fund. You can't put foreign language in one building and then not put it in another, and once again create another area where we don't have parity. Do we look first to fill to fill those needs before we look to add? Not shortchanging the importance of the strategic plan, but you've outlined some areas that it provides some inflexibility for what it is that you're doing and offering and the impact that it's having currently on teachers. Do we fix that first before we look to add? And if they're your foreign language teachers, that's the question that I would really like you to address. Would you change your ranking system on those things?
I would agree wholeheartedly with you. We got to fix the problem before we move forward and offer something new. And I mean it in a way that as we look to each year create our schedule, let's hypothetically say we do have somebody else who decides to retire and we're still facing a shortfall. We don't backfill that position. That creates sections. With the additional sections, we are scrambling to ensure that we have an adequate schedule for everybody. By putting somebody in dealing with the deficiency with the library, we settle that. That's taken care of. The foreign language piece, that is part of the strategic plan, and it's definitely a want. But I think that your point is valid and well taken from a principal's perspective on backfilling first.
I don't disagree with Mr. Packard at all. I do think that the commitment that the district made in the formation of the strategic plan, there was a lot of forward thinking in developing the profile of the graduate and going in the direction of expanding our foreign language offerings at the middle school. Does provide us with some significant opportunity to rethink and reimagine what our students are going to experience down the road. So I'll throw us back on the teeter-totter with that. I do agree with Mr. Packard about, we've got a problem, we should fix it. At the same time, that forward thinking and direction that the committee put forth last year with approval of the strategic plan is also very important to me, and that was one of the reasons why I had that ranked a bit higher and supported that in the positional ranking that we turned out. So it's a bit of a conundrum. So
maybe a way to answer it would be, the unknown still is how much money would be available. So obviously, if come in the next few months, the sum is here, we're gonna go down the list and say, we can't afford this, let's go to the next thing on the list and say, we can't afford that. So I don't think that we would say, because we can't afford what's ranked fourth or third, we'll just stop there. We'd go down the list. I think a couple of things, if I remember correctly, also foreign language was part of some conversation I thought I read somewhere with respect to your discussion around your override in the future, that in the next year you were going to add these positions back. I may be wrong, but I remember seeing something about that. So it was not just in the strategic plan, but it was somewhat of a promise or conversation that you had in talking about the override. So maybe I'm wrong. I think while all positions are important to some degree, this has the potential to impact a large number of students, because what you're looking at right now is, by expanding and putting this back in, it impacts what happens at the high school. It opens up more opportunities for students to take multiple levels of a foreign language, because now they'll finish level 1 by the time they leave a middle school. So the potential is that they can move on and take level 2 and then move into another language or continue on with that language, thus even opening up more opportunities for higher levels of French and or Spanish, whether it's honors or whether it's AP. Currently we have a combined French 3 and 4. partly because you don't have a feeder program at the middle school, would be one reason why you could have that. So I think it's really going to be about how much funding, you know, how much we have in resources above and beyond that may dictate where we have to look in this list as it's prioritized.
As we go through this list, when we start knowing actual numbers, can we have that, like, I feel like we look at the 26,000 and think it's 26,000, but it's truly more than 26,000 when you include benefits into that, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, for me, I would need like actual costs of how much it truly is.
Yep.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just for clarification on the BCBA one, that's taken care of,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
We can say okay on that,
Right,
because that's not
yes.
even ranked. That's already covered, so that one's okay.
That would be coming out of the
Right,
sped
so-
reorg,
right.
right? Remember, there are potentially the funding of 3 positions that come out of that savings. And that's our other question is, you know, if the savings look a little different, what happens with those positions? You know, they're essential. We're still going to have contractual services for BCBA. We're trying to add the BCBA for the obvious reasons that we explained. We're still going to move forward with co-teaching at the high school. We need to add that additional teacher. So, and we're going to have to add that job coach. So we may, you know, that's why I say if things shift a little, we may have to go back to circuit breaker to balance that a little bit, and that number could go down. So this is all still moving. So I know it's a lot to digest, but we wanted to give you all that we know at this point in time, and then to get some sense of direction from you as to whether or not there's anything here that you want taken off the list that you don't think we should be at least having conversations about. Whether or not we can fund it, you know, is a whole other issue. And certainly, I doubt that we're going to get through all of them for next year, unless miraculously money appears.
I would just like to say, I truly appreciate the work that was put into this. It's clear that there was a lot of thought, and I appreciate the way that you brought everybody together as a team, and I appreciate how easy it is to follow. I think that it will do well for us as a committee as we are faced with maybe some opportunities, and so thank you for.
It really wasn't one person.
No,
all
I
of the
just think that the
principals
whole
from the
team.
time, and all of the directors from the time the budget process began were, you know, actively involved and advocated for their needs, and provided a rationale for it. And as I said to you earlier, there's nothing here. I think my words were that were frivolous. There are all of these positions that we are warranted. The reality is, given where we are at this point in time, we don't have the money to fund them all. So we look at trying to at least be able to be proactive. Should something change dramatically in the budget between now and the end of the year, that would allow us to continue to move forward and say, here's what's next, so that the principals have the ability to move forward, that we don't need to come back and have another discussion about what's next. Certainly, we would have and say to you, we're ready to go, because guess what? Good news. This has just happened, and we're able to now move to this before we would post it. But I just wanted you to be on board with the process and the way we went through that. The same thing would hold true if no one has any questions on the new positions on the reorganization, because there were a number of things that we were looking for, and that's in the next section, section 4. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just for clarification purposes through the chair, on the original memo under the reorganization, and I'm just looking to capture on the priority ranking, Shepherd Hill has 2 sped teachers, one through the reorg of team chairs and one through the reorg of
Trading,
IAs.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and when you went to give numbers,
Yeah.
I'm looking back at
Right,
an extra person.
Right,
Okay.
yes. So, right, one of those would come through the sped reorg, and the other would come through the potential savings, and the other would come by trading in, if you will, the same thing that all the principals were intending to do. And then, remember that Heritage was going to do an internal kind of transfer to get 2. So, one through trading in 2, and the other through, you know, the potential swapping of a teacher. Any questions on the personnel reorganization as we presented it? You know, we're excited about it. We strongly believe that this model will help us deliver services in a much better manner, more effectively to our students. I'm excited. I know that the principals, when we had this initial discussion, really were on board. And moving forward, I think it's really going to provide a better delivery model for students. Anything else that you wanted to add?
No, but just so I'm clear for the next meeting, I'm going to prepare 2 different revenue and assessment projections. One, basically duplicating what you see here tonight, and 2, offsetting those expenses so the total assessments to the 2 towns does not increase. Is that my understanding of the committee?
My understanding would just do the one where there's no increase, but that was only me. I don't know what the majority would say.
And I feel the same. I don't know about the others.
I personally would like to see you prepare both, because I think it's too early to not adjust, to adjust with the assessment process. We haven't had conversations with towns. We don't know if there's any flexibility with them, and I think we should have the conversation first before we do both, so I
We
personally, I don't
hope
know.
to set up a meeting, Mr. Matthew and I. We're looking at maybe next week, we're not sure, with both town administrators. We may have a better sense after having a preliminary discussion how this may work. So if you would like not to take a vote this evening and for us to maybe prepare both, but to have some conversations in the near future with both of them, because I think March 20th is a little too late to have that conversation, that larger group, and I think we might get a better sense whether, by testing the water, whether or not this is something that would make sense. And then we could bring
I'll be voting on the
it.
preliminary budget next meeting.
Next
I'll be
meeting.
voting on the preliminary budget next
You'd
meeting.
be
so we'd have
voting
to have
on the
those
budget on
figures
the
there.
27th to be in accordance with your 45 days.
So while the
Yeah.
20th is meaningless almost. in
That-
terms
That's,
of that.
March 20th is, that's why,
Yeah.
you're right. So, you know, if we can set that up, depending on people's schedules, that may warrant, you know, a discussion at the meeting that
Yes,
evening on the
yeah.
27th.
And there's no harm in doing both,
Yeah.
but I'm really for keeping it the same.
Can we get a general maybe consensus from people? Maybe a
Elaine
sense without a
wants
vote?
Both.
I think you
Yeah.
need to move forward with both until we see where the towns are, because we have to come back to the conversation of whether or not the priorities that we have in place are going to then make us look at other changes that we need to do in order to put those in place. So we can't not keep the assessments where they are and try and grow without something giving. And we don't want to lose people, we don't want to increase the budget, and we want to grow, and we can't have it all. So if we're not going to raise above minimum local assessment, we have to look at what has to give on our end as far as what we're putting in here for priorities. So-
I support both. I really think that that's us doing our due diligence to the school district by approaching the town. We're not saying we're going to force their hand, but I think that it's appropriate to have those conversations.
Through the chair, everything that we've proposed right now, except for the 3 positions that we've talked that are compliance issues, everything else that we've looked at that is a new position has been created through adjusting something else. So technically, although we're discussing a lot of new positions here, they're not new. They're reshuffling current assets to create that new opportunity. We're reassessing what it is that we're doing. So I've only heard we're adding people that we need to do to be legally compliant. Those are the only new positions that we have.
I would agree with both.
Yeah, I don't object to it. Yeah.
I'm against it.
I just feel that we did make a promise to the towns that we were going to keep the assessments. If we got this 2.5 override, it would last for 2 years. So I will never vote to increase it for this fiscal, but no harm in looking at it.
I think it gives the impression that they're considering it, and I would not consider it at all. and I won't even if the majority does. I will never go up with the assessments this year because that was what part of the deal was
Right.
last year. And there's nothing like having goodwill with we have had wonderful relationships in Dudley and in Charlton with this town officials. And to do this, I think is going to backfire if they even think we're considering going up. So that's why I'm against. It's not that they're not needed. We can justify every penny. But I think goodwill is a big part of this, and that's how we passed our override, by being upfront and telling them this is it for 2 years. And now we're going to go up $98,000, which may not seem like much on budget, but it's still an increase.
And I was in the central office when a town official came in, and they repeated the same thing to me, saying, oh, well, we know what our assessment's going to be this year. And it was someone from Charlton. And so their understanding is that we're not going to ask for more money. It just happened that I was there when this town official came in and happened to say that to me.
Through the chair, I think that everyone is making very good points, and goodwill is very important, but I think we also need to be transparent in that in order for us to continue to grow and do what we need to do for the sake of our children, expenses do increase. So having the conversations with the towns and just letting them know where we are and what we may need in order to continue to grow, I don't think is a poor decision. I think it's just making them part of the process with us.
Through the chair. Just a comment. I think one of the things that we worked very hard over the last couple of years through the budget process was to present to the town what our needs were and respect what the towns were willing to support and willing to fund. I am more than comfortable if the decision is made to go forward with a budget with no increase, that's the direction that we go. But we need to inform the constituency that we move forward with that budget, and this is what we're sacrificing to move forward with that budget. I think it's our responsibility to turn around and provide the story of what we need to educate students. What the taxpayers are willing to fund is a different subject. I do just want to come back to one point, and I know I just sent it today, but the Mass Association of School Superintendents, as part of their legislative action, not just foundation budget review, one of the pieces that they're actively going to be legislating this year is lowering the required contributions on the part of towns. And I would suggest that you look at this and look for more information, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. But right now, it is expected that 59% of cost of education go to the town, and the other funding comes in from the state. If it was lowered 1 percentage point and it was to 58%, it adds $40 million to education, and it lessens the burden on towns. That's the place that Dudley and Charlton need to get at, is the pressure on the legislature to adjust what they're asking for towns to do. We all know that Dudley and Charlton are not in a position to have excess funding to do that. What we need to do is we need to act on the part of having the legislature lower their burden. So this is, and I don't mean to derail the conversation, but we need to bring this information to our towns, our boards, and our taxpayers to put pressure on legislature to lower the burden on the town. That helps the taxpayer, because we're sacrificing the quality of education that we're providing based on what our towns are able to support. And I agree with Mrs. Kabala. You know, we can only do so much with our towns based on what they can afford. We need to adjust somewhere, and our adjustment is what the state is providing.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's it. So we conclude the discussion, and we'll move on. Superintendent Search Committee update. Well, we did, the search committee did provide us with 4 finalists, and we did 2 interviews on Monday evening of this week, and that was Mr. Stephen Lamash and Dr. Michael Whaley. and we have 2 more interviews to go, and that will be on February 26th, I believe. And it will be Jennifer Haggerty and Dr. Julia Carlson on those evenings.
On that day, Ms. Haggerty will be in for her site visit, so that, on that particular day, the 26th.
So does anybody want to add to that?
I just want to make sure that if we have any snow, that we already have a plan in place to deal with that beforehand. Like, so that we can tell, Dr., is it, I forget if.
So you had 2 dates, the
We had 2
25th
dates.
and the 26th were potential dates that you had on
Right.
hold.
It
Ms.
was-
Haggerty was, I believe, on her vacation, that's the vacation week. It also happens to be the National Conference for Superintendents, so that was probably where she was returning from. So she was unable to make the date on that Monday. So you thankfully had Tuesday as an alternative too, I believe, so thus the Tuesday, the 26th. So I thank Mrs. Terry, who I think rearranged
Right.
the entire town to be able to make
Yeah.
this. 'Cause I
And
think-
those were 2 planned dates. We had that on the schedule.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm saying if we
If
have
we have-
snow on the
So,
26th.
given that, you would.
We'd have to go
if-
into March.
You'd be going into March, and you would be postponing, obviously, your selection of the
Right.
superintendent.
Okay.
So, yes. So we haven't looked that far at this point.
So let's hope.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we'll have the meeting the very next day. If there's a snow day, then we can discuss it on the
As
27th.
forecasts come out the weekend before we return from vacation, I'll be sending an email to the chair to say, what are you thinking? Which is what we did before.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything to it? Okay, we'll move right along. And Policy Review Subcommittee Report, consideration to amend district policies, GCG, substitute teacher, second reading, and vote is required. Do you want to go over that just briefly again before we take the second reading and waive the reading?
Do I? Boy, I've forgotten this. We've had this, it's been on here for so.
I know, just
This is-
to remind
yeah.
This is like the
everyone.
relative
This
that
is-
won't leave your
Right,
house.
right. So, and since I know that I was absent when you did your, the second revision, I believe it was.
Yes.
Just a few sentences.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there were some minor changes. I think you have those indicated in the document that is dated 1/9/18.
Nothing has changed.
Nothing
since
has
the-
changed?
Since the last
No.
meeting.
Since the last time that you met to review it.
Right.
Right.
Right, so.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion first to waive the reading of policy GCG.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, and now I will entertain a motion for our second reading and adoption of GCG.
Second.
Any discussion? I guess it's perfect this time. Okay, all in
Perfectly
favor?
perfect as Mary Poppins would say.
Motion carries, it's unanimous, so we have the policy.
Time for a party.
One down, 500 to go.
532.
Okay,
So I'm going to walk you through. Mrs.
JF we have
Right,
now.
JF,
School Mission Residency.
Anne Marie LaFond, our registrar, was unable to attend this evening, but I believe you have received in your packet a memo. Actually, the rationale for bringing this policy, JF, School Admission Residency, forward to you, came out of a number of discussions since the beginning of the school year that I've had with the registrar, or that she's had with me, regarding the current policy. So I will point out for you in this, I know this is a first read, but let me point out to you a couple of things that she said in her memo to you. And do you all have the memo? Did they not get the memo?
Yes, it's right there,
Okay.
it was in the blue
All right,
folder.
okay. Over the past, does everybody have it? Okay, so
It was in the folder.
Looks like, all right. So let me read it to you and summarize what the issues have been. Over the past few years, you currently have a policy that's in place, and basically, over the last few months, we've had a number of discussions because of the difficulty for her to follow the existing policy.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, okay. She indicates to you that there's been an increase in the family members sharing housing with relatives. And this makes verifying residency for new families more difficult, which in turn delays, obviously, the start of students in school. In an effort to better deal with this residency verification for those individuals who do not lease or own, but rather live with someone, we are proposing the following changes. The discontinuation of the current landlord affidavit, which is part of your current policy. You have in your current policy, you actually should see a copy of that. It is called Responsible Adult Affidavit, School Admission Residency. You'll see a couple of forms, and then you see residency statement. One of the things that we are recommending with new policies is that you don't attach forms, because those oftentimes change as part of your policy. So we're recommending with the new form that we are presenting to you this evening that that not become part of your policy. All right. The changes that we're recommending, we hope, will allow us for better and more efficient residency verification. And so I want to point out to you what is actually changed.
And it's in red, right?
It is in red. So we've tried to, hopefully you have red. Okay. First page has not changed. We're not recommending any change at all in that. But the second page is where Mrs. LaFond, it starts to have some problems when she is trying to collect from column A, B, and C. For verification of residency, we require that people produce documents, as most school districts do, in 3 columns. The first column is evidence of residency. The second column is evidence of occupancy. And the third column is evidence of identification. You are who you say you are. It is the first 2 columns that we're looking to change. All right. Currently, we do not have a major issue with someone who purchases a home. The issue that we have at times is that someone who is purchased to move into our home and has been living in it for a period of time is able to give us the documents that they currently need to give us. The challenge that she has currently is when someone is saying that they are about to close on a home. Can I stop my child? In fact, I have an email today from a parent who is closing on this date and would like to start one day early. So what we have had a lot of discussion about what people can produce, what makes sense, what we could ask them to produce. We don't really want to stop them from coming into the district if indeed they are a resident of the district. That's not our goal. But our goal is, based on what the law says, where you rest your head at night is where you attend school. And so we want to ensure that they indeed are a resident of either the town of Dudley or Charlton. So we would ask that you consider, first of all, for the inclusion that someone must produce for us if they are a homeowner. Currently it says that to show that you are a homeowner, you would produce a record of a recent mortgage payment and/or your property tax bill. We are looking for inserting the last 30 days, that it's important for purposes of currency that we are able to give some finer ability to define that it must be recent, what that really means. So we're asking that we insert that. That does not and is not the issue under this section of showing evidence of residency. We're also trying to deal with the fact that there are many people who will come with a document with a purchase and sales agreement, or they're saying we're closing. In some instances, the closing document actually has a date on it, but do they actually close on that date? Does someone follow them around and make sure that they do close on the date they say they close on? Currently, again, that's a discussion oftentimes that happens, and there has to be some follow-up to that. So we're trying to clarify that for someone, and we have no language right now for someone who is closing. I'm not in yet. I haven't got my mortgage payment to show you because I'm not in my house, but I'm closing next week. I'd like to start. So we want to be able to provide some opportunity and some way of defining this is what we could ask you to provide for us. A copy of their home closing document with a passing date, followed by a mortgage payment within 60 days from the time that you enroll your student. So if you can provide us that you're going to be closing on this date, and many of those say that, anticipated closing date, again, it could change, because you get there and then something doesn't happen right, and all of a sudden the attorneys say, sorry, we're not going to close. So we'd come back and say, okay, 60 days from enrollment, show us your mortgage receipt, show us that you've moved in, and payment. So again, it's going to require follow-up on the part of Mrs. LaFond to do that. But she said, she has indicated to me a number of times, I have people who want to enroll students, children, they're buying a home. I have every reason to believe, they've given me a purchase and sales, it's just that they might be closing in a week or two, and they want to start. So what do we do? The question comes sometimes that there is not a date for closing, and then we have to send them back, and we have to get some other kind of document from the attorney that indicates in some manner that they anticipate it's going to be a closing date at this point in time. We have to have something. So we're asking that you include that new language, which helps those people who are buying a home but haven't moved in yet and haven't even begun to make any payments. So, but they're closing, and they're closing in a reasonable amount of time. It does not indicate for those who tell you they are building a home, and it will be done. We're not dealing with that. That's a difficult issue to deal with when someone says, well, my new home will be ready. Well, but how would we know that? So the other issue that comes into effect is, so now we cover the person who owns a home as potentially purchasing a home, but what about someone who is renting? Currently, your language says a copy of your lease and a record of recent rental payment. The problem is that there are many individuals who are not and do not get a lease. They are month-to-month renters, and they have no way of showing us a lease. They don't have one. Their landlord doesn't want to write one for whatever reasons, and they can't produce it. So right now, we've had to be a little bit more liberal in interpreting your current language, because they don't have a lease. So we would ask that they would either show a copy of a lease and/or a copy of a recent rental payment, or a copy of a notarized statement from your landlord attesting to residency, and then, of course, a copy of a payment. So we're willing to say, look, your landlord is not granting you a long-term lease, but they need to attest to something. They need to give you something in writing, give us something in writing that says, I am renting to this person, and then show us a copy of a payment that you've made. That would allow us more flexibility in interpretation of the current language that you have. And then the third one is basically the same. It is the Section 8 agreement. That's not on here, so that's why it doesn't appear, because we're not making any change in that. That would still stay the same. It just didn't appear. The questions on residency. So we've really got three kind of categories. We've got the people who are buying a home, the people who are about to move into a home they're going to buy, and then the people who are renting. And in that, we have some people who have a long-term lease, and we have some that simply are on month-to-month. So we're trying to look at all of that. Yep.
How about share?
I'm going to talk about that in a minute.
okay.
Yep, I just was going to answer her question.
One question about,
Yep.
You want a document from A, B, and C?
That's your current, yes.
Were you,
Current policy requires a document for each one of those categories.
okay, because if you're allowing the person that's going to be closing, they're not going to have a document from B.
Well, some of them do. We're able to, they already have gone forward. In some instances, not always. We have to
Okay.
be a little bit flexible and say within 30 days, again, of the closing date, you're right.
Okay.
Some people are allowed, if it's not a new home and the owners aren't in it sometimes, they'll let them go in and start to change over cable and that, so that has to be a little bit flexible. You're exactly right. They may not have that document until they actually, move in. But in some instances, they're able to provide us with something. A lot of times it's, after the closing, they'll show, they have an oil bill because if they're buying a home existing, they usually have to pay for the difference in the oil, so they can show that through their closing costs, kind of thing. So, again, this is an art form when I've watched her look at these documents. Now, the other piece of this that we need to add, that is part of this evidence of residency, actually comes on the next page in red. It's for those individuals who don't own a home and they're not renting. So these are individuals, and again, it should say for the parents or guardians, who do not own a home. We have no language right now really around that. We have this affidavit that we called shared housing affidavit. We want to better define what that looks like. Currently, when someone does not own a home and has moved in with someone who lives in town, they simply bring in a document that that individual has signed, and they get it notarized. It has been, there have been instances where this year, in doing residency checks, the individual who signed that document has admitted to us that the individual doesn't live there. So we're trying to we understand that there are going to be many situations where people move in for financial reasons, for healthcare reasons, they move in with other people, and they're not paying rent, so they can't produce anything that shows us that they're paying rent. They don't own the home. And so how do we establish, how do we verify that they're a resident? So in talking with Anne Marie in more detail, she produced a document, it's similar but not the same, that we have in your packet called the Shared Housing Affidavit. We say the same thing that currently happens, that it must be completed and it must be notarized. But as you and I know, a notary doesn't attest to the fact that the person who signs it and says the person is living with them, actually that person is indeed living. They do not do the residency check. So what we have said and added really is the sentence that says, in addition, the homeowner or the lessor, because it could be an apartment, must appear in person with the parent or guardian at the time of registration and provide the appropriate documents as the owner or lessor of the apartment or home from columns A, B, and C. So you're saying that the individual is living with you, sharing. We want you to appear at the time of registration with them, with the notarized form, and we want you to provide for us that you indeed do own this home, or that you indeed are, you are leasing this apartment and this individual is living with you. So, because this is the avenue that unfortunately people have used in the past to kind of go around the fact that they are indeed residents of Dudley or Charlton. In that, parent or guardian must also still provide, photo identification to say that they are living at this address. They can do that by an auto insurance or registration. They can do that by the postal change, but all of those things can be done relatively easy. No one checks. No one verifies because you change an address that you really are living there. And so we're trying to tighten that up a little bit so that, God bless you, so that indeed we can ensure that that person is a Dudley and Charlton Charlton resident, and where they sleep at night is in Dudley or Charlton and not somewhere else. So those are the major changes, really, that we're proposing in this. And Anne Marie worked long and hard on this, and again, she's the one who's lived this for a couple of years, so I really relied on my discussions with her around what are the problems that you're seeing, where are the gaps. This probably is not going to be perfect. My hunch is we're going to have to revisit this at a future date, because every time you think you've covered it, there's now an exception that happens. So again, you have some leeway. We're not changing any other language. You know, there still remains the exceptions. None of that has changed. And extraordinary circumstances and all of that. We're just trying to tighten up the verification of residency from those first two columns.
Okay. Go ahead, Amy.
Question. I know there is an area in here regarding penalties. If an enrollment was determined to be not valid. Was there a consideration for repercussions to someone who is falsely stating that someone is living with them? Is that something that we need to consider? Is it an issue or is it a non-issue?
Well, my first question would be the cost involved to try to recoup whatever money that one determines. Typically, if it is someone who is not really a resident, it's probably someone who falls into the category of shared housing. And so the issue for us would be, sure, could we legally do that? I believe there's a law that actually stipulates you can. The reality of trying to go after someone, trying to and take them to court, I think the reality of that is probably less apt to be fulfilled. I've not ever done that in my career. We oftentimes, we threaten you under, this is, when you have this notarized, you're supposed to do this, of course, under, perjury, if you will, the fact, but yet we find people who notarize things, and we have found people that have openly admitted that that person's not living here. And when we find that out, we send them a letter. We provide them with an opportunity to come and meet with me before we do anything, and like unenrolling someone. We send a letter. We say, you have an opportunity to provide it. We've been brought to our attention that you may not be a resident, and we provide an opportunity for them to come in, to meet with me, to provide any other information that I should consider that would prove that they are a resident, and then we, quote, unenroll them, if you will. But we do not do it automatically. We recognize the fact that we're talking about students.
So
yeah.
really the greatest, I can't think of the word that I want to use. The greatest threat really is that the student would be unenrolled.
Yes, when we can prove that you are not a resident of either Dudley or Charlton, we will unenroll you, but we will give you an opportunity. Obviously, we're not going to just walk in like a Gestapo and say, we found this out, tomorrow we're taking your child, and too bad. We're not going to do that. We're trying to just close some of the gaps. The majority of people, live in these towns, but there are individuals who want to attend these schools because of the reputation of these schools and because of the fact that they know that their child will get a better education. While we can't fault them for that, the reality is they do not live in our towns. And those taxpayers, our responsibility, your responsibility, I'm charged with following your policy, is when we know that, we follow up on it, and we do a proof of verification of residency, and when we find out they're not, we go through the steps that we need to. It's a process, I guess I'm saying. So we're trying to just tighten up from the different columns the challenges that Anne Marie has found over the course of the last couple of years when she's been handling this. I can tell you that having one person handle it is much better than having it done at 7 different schools. I was happy when I came here that you had that, because the message oftentimes looks very different at different schools. Because you don't have one person doing it, you're asking someone who has a lot of other responsibilities. A lot of times it's the main office secretary who's asked to take this on. And there's just too many other things during the day for them to focus on all of this. So it's good to centralize it, I think, and to try to iron out some of these things.
Just 2 questions. One, I know when we get to the last page, it starts to talk about the children, rental property, home, and we keep referring to for the quarter in which they expect to be residents. Are we talking calendar quarter? So September, we're looking at August, September, October, November, so the quarter piece for me,
It's a
is it,
school.
is it a school quarter, a calendar quarter? I think it should just be specified so it's not confusing. And a parent isn't enrolling in December and thinking it's, because we have trimesters, we have
Right.
half year, so
Right.
it's confusing.
Right.
Depending on the grade level. The other thing that I just know that's not specified here is that there's nothing that specifies that a post office box is not acceptable for any of these documents that are mailing.
We, I believe that in some I don't believe that anyone has provided that. I know we had some discussion about a post office box as potential.
My
But
son
we've
is
not.
about to sign up for kindergarten tomorrow. And I think that the email that I got specified that it may not be in the policy, but I think Ms. LaFond did have that information out there.
Okay. Yeah. That no post office box? Okay.
I know
There are
that I
people
don't
who
wanna
pick
get
up
into the
their mail
procedure piece, but-
at post office boxes, though, that choose not to have it delivered to their home.
So you would still, as far as the registry was concerned, your driver's license would still be your actual living address.
Yes, and one can change that very easily. All you do is put a sticker on it, so
Right.
it's really, that's why there's a combination of A, B, and C. It's really the combination of documents from those three categories that really, one is, license just tells us this is who you are, you say. But the troubling one is really the evidence that you really live there, of being a resident of the two towns. That's the hardest one, that you really, if you can establish that, the other two are pretty easy. It's the first category that's the hardest sometimes.
Okay, so
I just
if
have one
the-
question.
Okay, go ahead.
On Roman rule 5A, the students enrolling in Shepherd Hill under school choice, we never mention other grades that might be school choice, even though we don't have it now. It just refers to Shepherd Hill. Should we have a section about students who enroll in school choice in general? Because someday we might have school choice in middle school again. It just says Shepherd Hill.
Yeah. What page is that? We did not,
they're
as I
not-
said to you, we did not do any
Page
changes.
4, it's on the top of page 4.
Page 4.
It's in bold print. Students enrolled in Shepherd Hill,
Oh, yeah.
exchange or school choice. Well, what about a kid in the 6th grade that might be school choice? We don't have any other schools listed.
So school choice should go out as a separate category.
I would say school choice. I'll take Shepherd Hill out of there and just say education exchange program, school choice, and then exchange programs at Shepherd Hill.
Is that, what section is that?
5, top of.
Section
Paragraph
5?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on
Section
top
5,
of,
okay.
top of page 4. It's in
Some
bold.
Exceptions?
4 or 5.
Okay, I'm looking at the new one, so
Okay.
probably lined up
Yeah,
differently.
thank you.
Yep. Okay, yep, okay.
I would take out enrolled in Shepherd Hill and just say
Yeah.
enrolled under special programs. Because otherwise, if we ever do
Yes,
have those
right.
kids.
Right, yeah, right. Okay, yes. All right.
Enrolled in the district, why don't we say something,
Right.
enrolled in Dudley-Charlton.
Dudley-Charlton Regional
something,
School
yeah.
District.
Jamie?
I'm fine with the policy change. I think that the way that you've made the correction.
Yes, we're going to do the,
Those three.
that's what my next question was.
But I wanted to go back to something that Dr. Nash was talking about.
Just the
Okay.
clarification on quarter.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
we're
What
not
section
quarters
is
in our
that?
buildings. It's, if you go back to the last page, it's under, item 6.
6.
When residency is in transition, it talks
Yeah,
about the quarter.
Okay, yep,
We should put school quarter.
yep,
Yeah,
School
it just,
quarter.
summer trimesters.
yeah.
Yes,
Summer
because
Because
trimesters.
summer
So what
trimesters
did
and
I
then
say?
elementary is half year.
So what are we gonna put?
All right, I'll go back and visit that.
I don't know. That's why I'm saying if it's calendar
So,
quarter, you
yeah.
know it's January,
Right,
February,
I know,
March,
yeah.
April, May, June.
Right.
So we have to decide what we want to.
So if you do, well, we won't do a first reading. You're going to go back and
Right.
check that one. Jamie, you had a question?
Yeah, Dr. Nash, you said how you think that it's worked well, that there's one person that's the
Yes.
registrar. I have, I guess my follow-up question to the email, a concern that I had about registration in Charlton versus registration in the Dudley central office. Is there any way that we could have a person cross-trained so that they know the exact same way that Ms. LaFawn does it, but is housed in Charlton so that it's not something that you have to cross into Dudley to do that registration? It wouldn't have to be full-time. It could be a task that maybe somebody specific already that's in the school has that they would have added on to their job duty.
We'd have to look to identify who that might be. I don't know in central office whether we would have someone. And I really have to look to see who else could take that on. There obviously could be someone, when she's out, ill or whatever, we'd have to have someone, because registration happens throughout the year. It's not a one-stop type of thing that happens, or one-quarter type of thing that happens early in the year. She's constantly doing registrations, it seems.
Right, I knew
But,
that.
yeah.
And I just thought if there was a representative in Charlton that had the same training as she did and was able to do it, you could say, Ms. LaFonda's available at the district office, or XYZ is available at Charlton Middle School.
I think the
and then it
issue,
provides.
the only challenge I would say would be trying to find out, who would we identify? Would it
Sure.
be, and then how would that person be available? Currently, she's available 5 days a week, all the time. This other person may not have that ability, that's all.
But she has other
yeah.
tasks. I thought you said that.
She does our data, she's our data person, so she does that in addition, right?
Right, so I guess my point of view, it
Right.
would be easier on the residents in Charlton,
Yep.
and it would provide cross-training to another individual, and it would provide coverage for when somebody was out.
Was she able to accommodate and do it?
She did,
Yeah.
and what I
Yeah.
understand, she was
Yeah.
wonderful,
Right.
really, let me say
Okay.
that. And from what I understand, the dates that she put forth in Charlton
Filled up.
were scooped in like a day.
right. So
And
I
so
think-
she gave 3
yeah,
dates,
right.
and all of the times were scooped within a day.
And that was primarily at kindergarten.
That's kindergarten,
Right,
correct.
right. So there may be, maybe we need to look at that from
I
that
think
lens.
maybe you should just
Providing
look
some other
at-
opportunities.
in kindergarten, like.
On
yeah,
an ongoing
registration.
basis.
Yeah, one time a
to-
year at least,
right.
that you
Well,
have some
even-
relief for her.
Potentially even on an ongoing basis. If you
Sure.
know that you get registrations almost every month, that you say, okay, 1 day a month, just like people set up their hours, I'll be on this side.
Or, like I was saying, I was trying to give a different perspective of saying, you have somebody that's also cross-trained that's
Right.
in Charlton. Because then if she has other duties,
Right.
it doesn't take her away from those other duties.
But her duties are portable. She can do them as long as she has a laptop. All her stuff is online, so that's the nice part, about her job. It really can be done remotely, so, okay, all right.
But yeah,
I
that
hear you,
doesn't
what you're
resolve the
saying.
cross-training,
Yep, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll bring back the policy at our next
Yep,
meeting.
okay.
Okay?
Well,
And consideration of request to increase nurse substitute rate.
Yes.
Dr. Knapp.
No, Mrs. Gerard.
Oh, okay.
Yes, she's been waiting patiently all evening.
Okay.
Nurses always wait.
I know,
That's what we do.
except when someone's sick, and then we hope you're not waiting.
Just like parents. So it's been, hi, I'm Marilyn Gerard. I'm the nurse coordinator for Dudley-Charlton Regional. And this week I had the special honor of being the Heritage School nurse and the Charlton Middle School nurse, taking care of students in both buildings. This is our 11th or 12th time this year that we've had no nurses at a building. Clearly, there's a liability concern there. Any of you who have children who have been in the school district, you know that when we're on duty, we're there. And when there's no nurse on duty, the secretary and the principals are having to step up, and they're being very gracious, but they're holding the emesis basin and calling the parents when the nurse is in the other building. So just throwing that out there to you. It's been 12 years since the substitute nurses have had a pay raise, and we have been actively recruiting nurses, but some of them can get paid a lot more money at the hospitals, and therefore they're not available to us to work. We've been staffing Mason Road School full-time with a substitute 80% of last year, and it will be close to 90% of this year. I pretty much have 3 nurses taking those days there, but there's still times when there's no nurse. And the principals have been wonderful, but it's really a concern. We have children in our buildings. Most of our buildings have at least 25% with very serious medical concerns. These are children that have asthma attacks that can be very paralyzing. We have children that need EpiPens. We call the ambulance on a regular basis. We have children that are in wheelchairs that need toileting, diaper changes, colostomy care, tube feedings. Most of our buildings need about 20 medications a day. This year, I only have 4 students that need medications, but I have 3 8-year-olds that have diabetes type 1, and their blood sugars are erratic because they're growing. So it takes a special nurse to be a substitute nurse to walk into that setting, and some of them will only work for a short period of time because they say, we can't do this. It's too stressful. We really need highly trained nurses, and they won't come and work for us if we're not able to pay them a little better. So I'd like you to consider this as a plea from the nurses, but also, we could also have parents come and speak with you about how important that is.
And let me just add that I know Marilyn and I met back in the fall. I met a couple of times. I support her request. If you were to go with an outside agency, which we looked into, but unfortunately we did not have one in this area, you would be paying $360 to $375 a day. So given the fact that she has worked extremely hard to stomp the grounds to get substitute nurses, and in many instances you end up with our parents who are nurses who maybe work 3 days in a hospital, who comes really out of the goodness of their heart because they have children in the schools and they want to do this as their civic duty. Well, I'd like to be able to pay them a little bit more, a little bit more competitive. I mean, she's provided you with a lot of information on the area rates. We are lucky that we do not have, it's always been my experience that, I'll tell you that nurses are, in all my career as a superintendent, nurses are hardly ever out. I don't know why, but maybe because they're immune to all the germs, because they're constantly with people who are sick. But I can tell you that very seldom did I ever have the experience of having nurses out in my career. Unfortunately, we have an occasion now where we have someone who has a medical issue, and Marilyn and others have been jumping in to cover, and that leaves their building uncovered, or she's running around trying to make sure, at this time that this person and this child who needs this is covered. So you're running back. And so, not that this is the answer, obviously, but it's good when I can sit down and meet a nurse and say, and we'll be able to pay you $175 a day, particularly when you know they're coming from hospitals making, or they're making in 3 days, a lot more money than this, and they're really coming to do it because they've got a commitment to this community and to the fact that they have children in the district, and that's really why they do, a lot of them do that, so.
So I'll entertain a motion to raise it to 175.
I'll make a motion.
Do you second?
Make a motion to raise the substitute rate to 175.
Okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Jamie, did you have something?
Make a motion.
Oh, okay. Any discussion?
It was a very thorough report, Mrs.
Yeah,
Surratt. Thank you
thank
very
you.
much. It was very easy to understand.
Seeing none, all in favor?
Yeah.
Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Can I just ask the effective, when would you like this to be effective?
Immediately,
Okay.
right now.
Need right now.
All right, we just wanted
Put down
to,
the motion.
We're all set.
okay.
Thank you. Very good,
I would
very
invite
good
any of
report.
you to come to any of our nurses' office for the day, so you can see firsthand what happens.
Thank you.
I had the
I think you
pleasure
would
of
really be
experiencing your nurse's
thrilled to
office, Mrs.
see.
Surratt.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so
Keep
much.
very great
Yeah.
detailed
Yeah.
records.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
and thank you for waiting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
We got all the saltines in this
Right.
Last,
Yes.
consideration of request for home instruction, policy HBG.
Yes, for your acknowledgement, I bring forward 2 homeschooling requests in accordance with our policy. Grade 8 student at Charlton, and in grades 3 and 6, 2 students also Charlton.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the home request.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And
Okay.
give this to Kaylee because.
There you go.
Probably wanted to get about it.
Too sweet.
Next meeting dates. School committee meeting Wednesday, February 27th at the Charlton Middle School at 7 p.m.
Should be 6. Isn't that the one we're starting early?
6:30. No,
6.
wait a minute.
That's
The
the budget.
27th was 6
That's
Oh,
the
yeah.
budget one, isn't it? We're starting at 6. When
Are we
make it
starting
later?
that at 6? It's like a fog.
That was the one for the
Okay.
budget and the superintendent. So we need to-
All right.
Well, you also had your deliberation of the superintendent
so
search,
it's
so I
like
think
to
you were
start at
going to
6.
start a little bit earlier, given the fact that you had
It
two.
was 6. It was 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
We did that.
You said,
Okay.
what time was it?
6.
6?
Okay, and on the 22nd, as I said before, February 26th, I'm sorry, that will be our interviews of the superintendent,
Still at 5.
and that's still at 5. Budget and Finance Subcommittee is going to be February 25th, 8 to 10 in the morning.
8:30.
Elaine told me 8.
8:30.
Oh,
Sorry, 8:30.
remember I asked you, you said 8.
It's too early in the morning, Paul.
8:30.
And I did say that to her. I go, Elaine, that's too early. That's okay. I'm glad somebody else is making a mistake. Okay, so the
Interviews.
Budget and Finance Subcommittee on February 25th will be 8:30 to 10. Policy Review Subcommittee, Thursday, February 28th. That's at the Shepherd Hill Regional High School, and that's at 9 a.m.
And it's a negotiating that same day, 4 to 6.
Okay. And future agenda items, vote preliminary FY 2020 budget, selection superintendent of schools, report of the Policy Review Subcommittee. Any other suggestions?
There'll probably be a budget and finance. We will have met with the
Update.
capital planning people.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. So at this time, we will be entering into executive session for the purpose to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions on contract negotiations with union personnel, only to reconvene in regular session to take votes if necessary and adjourn. I'll take a roll call. Jamie Tanton.
Yes.
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 And she's going home.